All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Standards and Assessment Committee on December 6th. Thank you for everybody that is joining us today. We appreciate you. It's good to see your faces. So we will start. We have Member Booth that is making his way here and Member Reel, but we have Member Earl here, and we're going to start just working down the agenda, and they will be joining us shortly. So if I could turn the time over to Patty Norman for our recognition of progress, achievements, and improvements.
Yes, Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement, and this recognition is absolutely awesome. And before I start reading it, I want to recognize those that are here that this recognition is all about. So can we have Crystal Emery, Lavina Grippentag, Deanna Taylor, and Jenny DeVries stand up? Okay, check out this powerhouse right here. Yeah, come stand right here. And when I read this to you, it's jaw-dropping. It really is, all of the work that's been done. So the Utah State Board of Education mission is to open doors of opportunity for all Utah children. This month, we'd like to recognize the Special Education Post-Secondary Transition for Students with Disabilities team. This is a big job. The Utah State Board of Education goals of early learning, effective educators, and leaders, safe and healthy schools, and personalized teaching and learning are key to the special ed post-secondary transition for students with disabilities work. The post-secondary transition for students with disabilities team aims to facilitate a seamless and successful transition from high school to post-secondary education, employment, and independent living by providing resources, tools, and training to educators, students, and parents. A few of these resources we highlight are the Utah Post-Secondary Transition Elevated website for students with disabilities, the Utah Post-Secondary Transition Elevated Planning app for students with disabilities, facilitating the statewide collaborative on improving post-secondary transition outcomes for students with disabilities, and offering a wide range of professional learning and technical assistance to educators across the state. I'm especially grateful for this because I think this is a moment to not only shine on the work that you're doing, but to inform the public of the additional work that sometimes goes behind the scenes with the work with our students with disabilities. So first, the Utah Post-Secondary Transition Elevated website, and if you are looking online, this is attached and it is linked in there, so you'll be able to go to it. So the website, the purpose of the Utah Post-Secondary Transition for Students with Disabilities Elevated website is to improve post-school outcomes for students with disabilities by providing a platform for sharing resources, information, and tools for collaboration and coordination of services for students, families, educators, and community partners. The website is composed of an introductory section and sections for each of the above-mentioned constituent areas. Each page, I don't know if that's the right word, but yes, each page contains information and resources targeted to a particular audience. The second one is the Utah Post-Secondary Transition Elevated Planning app for students with disabilities. This app for students with disabilities is designed to help Utah students, families, and educators to participate in an enhance the post-secondary transition for students with disabilities planning process. As a Utah student with a disability who is 14 years or older, or a family member of a post-secondary age student, this app can help prepare for the individualized education program meeting where post-secondary transition for students with disabilities planning will be discussed, and the post-secondary transition for students with disabilities plan will be created. And the statewide collaborative on improving, I feel like there's almost like clapping in between, but we'll go through the whole thing. It's just like each one of these is so big that but yeah, clapping inside, and then we're going to, yeah. So the next one, statewide collaborative, the Utah statewide collaborative on improving post-secondary transition outcomes for individuals with disabilities is a working partnership of state agencies and many other organizations that serve post-secondary transition students with disabilities ages 14 to 22, youth across the state of Utah. The purpose of the STC is to collaboratively develop a shared system change vision and common language to improve post-secondary transition for students with disabilities outcomes for youth in Utah. The STC developed a shared goal, a theory of action, and identified implementation activities in an expanded logic model. I'm going to read that one more time because any of you that have done this work, listen to these three very key things: shared goal, theory of action, and identified implementation activities in an expanded logic model. It's a standing ovation right now. Okay, the collaborative is now tasked with executing the identified activities as a unified system of post-secondary transition for students with disabilities. The results of the STC initiatives are reported to state and federal policymakers for the 5 years of 2021 through 2026 through the Utah State Board of Education State Systemic Improvement Plan, the SSIP, which you might see it referred to in your documents. And then our last piece on this is the implementation of post-secondary transition for students with disabilities professional learning. These professional learning opportunities for educators focus on enhancing practices in post-secondary transition for students with disabilities. These include a self-paced Canvas course on writing compliant and quality post-secondary transition plans, covering assessments, goals, services, and other agency involvement. Additionally, there is an annual webinar series on building post-school success for students with complex needs, emphasizing student-driven teaching and fostering independence through community-based learning. Another notable offering is a 5-week course on using customized employment in the classroom, which includes both self-paced and live virtual sessions to teach key elements of customized employment practices and their application in individualizing work-based learning. The Post-Secondary Transition for Students with Disabilities Institute is a 2-day conference held in June to enhance team collaboration and efforts to improve student post-secondary transition for students with disability outcomes. In 2024, over 350 Utah educators attended. So in conclusion with this amazing team, the work of the post-secondary transition team for students with disabilities is targeted towards helping educators understand the needs of post-secondary transition for students with disabilities and have the resources, as mentioned above, needed to provide an individualized right combination for students as they prepare to transition into adult life. Thank you so very much. Anything that you'd like to ask them? Oh. And if there's a question and an answer, then one of you would come to that.
I can clearly see I need to go through the website a little bit closer on this, but I actually have a family member that is in the transition right now with some severe disabilities and such, and so it's I'm kind of following it on that end of it, right? Anyways, I just know that a few years ago, we know that we needed to work in this area. And I just looking at this, I can tell that there's been deliberative effort in order to make sure we're engaging with the communities and with the families in order to receive the best services. So thank you for all your work you've done. And I'll do a deeper dive over the weekend. So thank you.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart for my whole life. My little sister has Angelman syndrome, and she was able to transition, and she got a paper shredding job. And that was, there's a level of like, is she aware or not? But regardless, it's like she graduated, she went to seminary, she graduated, and then she was able to have this routine that manifested in her life after school where she would go to work, and if you know anything about Angelman syndrome, they're very, very happy and they laugh all the time. And so you can imagine, I love her. Every time you feed that paper, ha, 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 ha. I mean, we're talking joyful work. So and another experience was this special student in my children's school, and it was a unique, thoughtfully worked out situation. And he stayed in the first grade class until he was, is it 22? I forget the age where they transition out. And we had a huge celebration for when he graduated. The routine for him were amazing. He was like the rock star of the school. He was loved, and then we get to see, knowing that the mom was supported in those next steps, because that was kind of a scary thing, and they are what happens next, especially where those supports have been a part of his life for so long. And so anyway, thank you. And I'm very happy to see that this is a work that is just developing and growing, and we're really starting to understand how their lives can manifest into quality and opportunities. So thank you. Okay, so I think we are on to public comment. However, I don't believe we have any.
Unless there's somebody that is here that was going to.
Great.
Yeah. We'd like to welcome Member Real and Member Booth. Traffic and puppies. All right, so I think we'll just go to what we're going to do if you are following us online is actually go to action item 1.8 and bump that up to the top for time purposes. Instructional materials review rubric. So we'll get that going and open this up for discussion.
Yes, at this time, we were going to have Etiana and Terry Davis, if they could come up and just kind of give some background on this information and where it's at, and then moving forward with some of the drafts that are in the backup. That's go ahead. Would you like for me to share? Okay, and that way you can, or let's see. Nope.
Patty, which draft are we gonna look at?
We're going to start with the slide deck and then look at, I think, draft, the draft 2 and then the draft 3. Yep. You can go ahead, Etiana, and I'll just start talking. I'll just get it up on the thing.
Okay, hello, my name is Etiana Colimels, and I'm the Ethnic Studies Education Specialist here at USBE. And then shortly joining us will be Terry Davis. She is the person over instructional materials process. So here, as we wait for the slides to come up, I'm just going to talk you through some background on what instructional materials is, and then the updates that's happened to the process, and then the incorporation of ethnic studies as an indicator in the instructional materials rubric itself. So the Utah code for instructional materials can be found in 53GE 4-4. There's also a board rule for it. And as Terry comes up, this is actually better for her to explain this part. So I'm going to yield for a moment.
Terry Davis, Instructional Materials for the Utah State Board of Education. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the instructional materials rubric. A couple of years ago, we were looking at the rubric, and we decided that it needed to be updated for code to align with code on board rule. So we started in this process. In the meantime, the legislature decided that they would like to add ethnic studies into what educators were, what we had for instructional materials. So we started looking at the rubric and decided that we needed to add this component to the rubric. And so in our process of updating, we considered the language in the code and also recommendations from the commission, and put the language of both of those into our rubric. So right there under the instructional materials, we have the Utah code and also the board rule R277469. And we had two goals. We had the goal of updating the rubric, and then we, so that there is a basic model, and then the content areas could add their content into the rubric. So we're here to talk about the basic model. We call it the generic instructional materials rubric. And so we wanted the basic items in there, and then the content areas will add more of their professional practices and the standard, the items that are in their standards, but also with English language arts, with their rubric, they will be adding all the components of the science of reading into their rubric. So we'll have each area adding their items. So we made a draft of the rubric, and over the course of a year, the draft has changed to accommodate a variety of things. We have on the rubric 3 sections. We have the compliance section that has the Utah Regulation and Board Rule. And in that section, material must pass that area before we continue down into the content area. So the second section is the content area that will have items that are specific to the content, plus the basic or generic rubric. And then in the third area is the material characteristics, which makes up the general make and design of the material. So now I'm going to pass the baton over to Etiana, and she can talk about her part.
Okay, so with the updates happening to the instruction materials rubric, and then the ethnic studies core standards and curriculum requirements coming up, we sought to create a pathway for LEAs to be able to select materials by that December 31st, 2025 deadline, as they are to select curriculum and instructional materials for teaching ethnic studies throughout kindergarten and 12th grade. And so having this be an indicator in the rubric would help ease some of the burden off of LEAs in having materials that were already reviewed by the state and local educators on whether or not we met ethnic studies specific definition here in Utah. And then with that, I would like to just kind of backstep for a half a moment and explain what ethnic studies in Utah is, since we have a very specific definition in Utah Code for ethnic studies. Thank you, Patty. So the definition of ethnic studies here in Utah is the interdisciplinary social and historical study of how different populations have experienced and participated in building the United States of America, including the study of the culture, history, and contributions of Utahns of diverse ethnicities. And Utahns of diverse ethnicities means individuals who are residents of Utah and Native American, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic or Latino, Black or African American, Asian or Asian American, or from diverse backgrounds and experiences. So the definition in Utah Code for these requirements is quite broad in who we are talking about and what we're looking into for as students dive into what ethnic studies looks like here at a local and national level. In addition to that, the code for the ethnic studies requirements calls out what should be some minimum criteria for both course standards and instructional materials. So what that looks like in course standards is a focus on increasing cultural awareness in existing standards, a focus on character traits, which is outlined in the civic and character education bill that came out the year before this. Ethnic studies education requirement, but it also calls out that materials and standards should look into opportunities to recognize and incorporate the histories and contributions of diverse perspectives of these ethnicities. And then, of course, the definition that I read for ethnic studies itself. And this leads into what this would look like at the curriculum and course standards level, which is, of course, aligning with those course standards that have those items that you see on the left, and then focusing on shared identity, cultural differences, the shared and unique characteristics among students, the common elements that unite Utahns, and respect for distinct sociocultural identities. And this would be looked at through different lenses of cultural history within the United States, but also global history to put everything into context. So you can skip to, sorry, can you go up, Patty, to slide 14-ish? Okay. So with that, the Ethnic Studies Code also speaks about the Ethnic Studies Commission, which was a legislative body that has worked over the past 2 years to draft recommendations for the Utah Board of Education on how to go about starting to implement these requirements. And so 2 of those recommendations was first for the board to carefully consider the use of ethnic studies in course standards and curriculum, ensuring it is narrowly tailored to incorporate age-appropriate opportunities that naturally arise through education without pretextual effort in courses, programs, or activities where ethnic studies is not the primary focus. So with this first recommendation, Terry and I have put significant effort to make sure that in the rubric itself that this is reflected, where you'll see as we get into one of the drafts of the rubric that it is not included in the top compliance piece of the rubric for this very reason, that even though ethnic studies is required, it's not required to be in every single material that goes through the process. So it has been put in as an indicator within the content section of the rubric to just simply see where it naturally arises, and of course would be age appropriate based off of the other components in the rubric. The second recommendation of the Ethnic Studies Commission is that the public education system should incorporate curriculum of people and cultures that reflect the state's various demographics without commentary that seek to violate the neutrality standard established in the Equal Opportunities Utah Code, or known as House Bill 261. 261 speaks to neutrality standard to prevent public education from prohibited discriminatory practices, assertions, and trainings. And USBE should ensure that no board system, local education agency, or school action or policy violates this neutrality standard, which is written out in that Utah Code. And Patty, if you could go to the next slide. So within that House bill has been broken out into several Utah codes. But I would like to highlight some sections of that from 53G -2-105 and 53GB-1-118. So the first code on the left speaks to specifically to LEAs about what discriminatory practices that they should not participate in, and it's listed through an A through L list. And within this list itself, there isn't anything that, based off our definition in Utah Code for Ethnic Studies and the goals for the curriculum and standards, that would qualify as a prohibited discriminatory practice in itself. And that code then goes on to say that whatever the program is, it should ensure that all students have access, which ethnic studies, whether it is incorporated into the learning or as an elective course, is open to all students in the state if the LEA chooses to offer an ethnic studies course. And then that code also goes on to say that nothing in this section should limit or prohibit an LEA's authority to establish policies that are necessary to comply with state law, which, again, if an LEA wanted to offer an ethnic studies course or have a club or something related to that, this is the section that offers that opportunity. In the second piece of code, the one that ends in 118, that is part of the prohibited discriminatory practice codes. It also states that an institution shall develop strategies to promote viewpoint diversity, which would be the goal of ethnic studies. And it also calls out that there should be civic education, which connects back to that civic education and character bill that goes along with ethnic studies. At this point, would you like me to show draft 2 of the rubric and walk through that?
Sure.
And so as we are looking at this was draft 2, and there is a draft 3 as well. And as a precursor to this is used for those people that are coming and being a reviewer. And the reason why this doesn't have the content yet. So this is just the precursor to the content, to be able to get to the content standards, to be able to say, yes, it passes this, and then there will be the lengthier portion of what this is with all of the content standards. The other piece of this is to it's meant to ensure the fact that if it violates law or does not violate law, and also to ensure inter-rater reliability. If a publisher comes in and something is deemed as it doesn't pass, then there are comments that the publisher would get, and that publisher would then be able to say, no, it didn't pass, and then the comments as to why it didn't pass. But it's very particular to the fact that we have to make sure there is that inter-rater reliability, and that all of the elements are known and agreed upon when it is being scored. So turning it over.
It's also for a material, remember that there's a team that reviews the material. So there's 3 people that will come together to score a material, and then they will take their score and input it into RIMS. So if you look at this rubric, at the very top, we have the compliance section with the Utah State code. And then we have in the bottom of that section, we have the free from advertising, e-commerce, or political interest. Then the next section is the content section, where these are the basic items that we will have for each rubric, and then the content areas will add into this section more line items. So if you look, we have the alignment, we have basic navigation through it, we have instructional support, and then we have assessment. And then the section that we're here to talk about today is the inclusive components, and also the shared values and character traits. So if we scroll up into the inclusive components, we'll take a look at that section, and I'll have Etiana talk about that.
Okay, so the rubric has 4 main columns. It's extensive, adequate, inadequate, and none. So focusing first on the adequate section, there has been efforts to take the majority of the language from the Ethnic Studies Utah Code and incorporate it into the adequate section, and then also providing description to reviewers, publishers, and whoever else would be interested in looking at the rubric, description on what some of those terms and language that comes out of the legal code means in practice. And then the extensive piece is, since the language and criteria in the Utah Code specifically says considers at a minimum, what does this look like if it goes beyond just the minimum standard and really dives into ethnic studies as the discipline itself? And so we've taken additional language to describe what different concepts and themes in the ethnic studies discipline itself might appear that would go beyond just the minimum considerations that are outlined in the code itself. So the inclusive component section mostly focuses on the language in the ethnic studies course standards and curriculum requirements itself, and then the shared values and character traits primarily focuses on the civic and character education code that is linked to the ethnic studies code.
You'll also find that there is a crosswalk, a language crosswalk, and I'm trying to share it and it's not letting me share that piece. So let me see if I can get that there, a crosswalk of where the pieces fit into the code as well. So that concludes our presentation, subject to any questions from the committee. And then I'm going to put up, so this is draft 2, and then we did meet with board members and there is a draft 3. So I'm going to bring draft 3 up now. And then Chair Booth or Vice Chair Green, you can lead it as you would like.
All right. So are we going to review draft 3? And do we have any comment?
Can I just wanted to add a little bit of comment just for maybe the public in general. I think why there's so much question around this is a lot of curriculum materials they're not made here in Utah. They're made in California, Texas. They're designed for other states. They're designed for other systems. We just happen to be part of that because we purchase curriculum, right? But we're not the main purchasers around the nation. And so often those curriculum pieces are aligned with standards in other states. And I just pulled up Minnesota's ethnic studies standards, but you can look at a number of California. The California has got quite a bit of pushback on their previous ones because it actually did create a lot of animosity between groups. There was a lot of contention. Minnesota's it's around power structure, it's around oppression. It falls right under the philosophical view that aligns with critical race theory. And so when we're asking questions about this, it's not. And I just want to be clear on that it's not about different cultures and different people. It's making sure that we're adhering to the law that allows all people to engage. And I think a lot of the language in the ethnic studies law that we have in Utah is very different than other states as you look around the nation. And so when we're asking the question around making sure that when we get outside materials and they're coming into the state of Utah, that we're not just going, okay, well, it has diverse people in it, but we're actually looking and saying, does this overstep the line where it does violate those provisions that are listed in 261? And you reminded me, we should be saying the code instead of keep referring to the law, but we all kind of know what the law is, so it's a little easier to do that. So it's creating that balance there. And so I appreciate the thoughtful allowing us to kind of engage in that and try to find that sound balance area. So it's very clear when we're getting outside materials that we're weighing them against the standards that we've established here and the laws that we've established in Utah, because so many of these items are coming from other areas just because of the numbers, right? They're going to make a profit off of aligning with other entities. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there so people understand why there's considerable discussion and dialogue and thought behind this. And I appreciate our professionals here at the state because they've been willing to share that this is the way we see it. No, we're not going in that right, so that we can actually land in a very balanced area. So I would encourage us to move draft 3. And then I know that there was some discussion there. I can go over the recommendations in draft 3 just really quickly. I'm going to start at the far, right or left? What are we? The right. So I'm like, what are we? Right side of the page. And just when I originally read the wording that was there, I was unsure if we were saying it didn't meet any components or it shouldn't be included. So the language is try to just clean that up for both these sections. So the material doesn't meet the requirements included within it's very clear. When you read that, you're like, okay, I understand what that means. And then we're moving over to the next column. That one, it doesn't have these components. And then the third one from the right. So my understanding, the reason why we couldn't just use the language of the law, because I said, let's just use the language that's there, but it was like people wouldn't understand what that is. So if we're just using the language of the law, I thought, and I'm just, this is why I removed the top part, is articulating what the language of the law would look like. So the language that's there in black was there. That's what was recommended. And just trying to be a little more concise on that. When you look down towards the bottom, instead of adding an extra piece at the bottom, just adding, so it says, where should I start? The material accurately represents the cultures, languages, traditions, beliefs, values, and customs of people from diverse backgrounds through, instead of having to create the end part there, through a variety of text, examples, scenarios, imagery, and applications. And I feel like that expands that. It's not just listing the code again. And that's where the question was, well, people won't understand if we just list the code. Here's what it should encompass. And then as we slide over to the fourth column there from the right, we're going backwards there. So it would include that. And then it would also just include just a narrowed down, not when I say narrowed, it's just very concise. These are the pieces that would fall under that. And then on the far end, let's title what this is. This is ethnic studies. And then these are the provisions that we're needing to make sure we adhere to, just so that we've got that. We've got a framework to work within. The legislature's given us that, narrowly tailored, naturally arising. And then to me, there's three key components. And then also without commentary that seeks to violate the neutrality pieces of code. And some of the code was articulated. There's other pieces of code that could be articulated under the prohibited discriminatory practices. And those are where we're finding some of those violations, in my view, in other states. And I'm just going to hit just a couple of those where it asserts the social political structures are inherently a series of power relationships. So that would no longer align with the standards that are within Minnesota and a couple other states, because they focus only on power structures and then oppression. And so anyways, that's where I feel like the balance, we're reaching a good balance with the language that's here. And I can go through the second one too, but I'll leave it at that because I know Sarah had recommendations. So on that first part.
I'm Vice Chair Green. Okay, one idea is that we work backwards like how you described it, because I think that we can at least get through, some of these columns. Okay, the last two columns. But in working on this, I tried to put my mind into I tried to put myself into the reviewer's shoes. And so not only making sure that we're covering all of the requirements within the law, but also making sure that we're crafting something that is useful for a reviewer. So something that when a reviewer looks at this rubric, they can go through and say, this, oh, it doesn't have this, next column, it has this, right? So that they can actually review those materials. So on that, I don't know if we have anything that raises a flag that might be unhelpful for reviewers. I don't see any on the last two columns that you have in your draft here. I'm not sure if staff has any concerns about the last two columns on this draft 3 when it comes to reviewers. It looks like the only difference is, I think it was the same as what you had recommended possibly.
Can we possibly, when we're talking about the columns, say like the title of it, it's non-inadequate, adequate, and extensive, just for clarity purposes?
Yes, I called it A, B, C, fail. So I will change my mind. Yeah.
So you're referring to the inadequate and none columns?
Yes.
Okay.
Or C and fail. Yeah.
Staff does not see any problems with C and D columns.
Okay, I feel like we could maybe vote on those and then keep moving on. Does that work as a process?
Would it be better to not use the contraction doesn't, this is picky, but just does not in that far right column?
Sure, right?
Okay, so we'd like to change the word.
That's more grammatical, but yeah.
Yeah,
it could be.
material does not meet the requirements within the ethnic studies core standards and curriculum requirements. And it has been moved that we approve columns, are we saying C and D? Also known as, Tatiana, could you remind me of what those last,
Inadequate and none.
inadequate and none?
And I didn't put it on.
Any additional discussion to that?
Yeah,
Okay, I got it.
I'm happy to, I just don't have access.
To draft 3.
I have draft 3, but it's not editable.
yeah. That's our.
Oh,
We don't have it edited.
What do I need to do?
Leah, the Word document?
Yeah,
Yeah, if you have that, then I can be editing on the fly.
okay, let me see what I can find
Right in
here.
the motion, in the motions document. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. So she's gonna send it to Leah.
okay, we're gonna
Give me just a
bring this
second.
copy up. Just one moment.
So we'll put it in the motion itself. So. Yeah. And then we'll put it on here so that we have both.
Okay, let me just forward this to you. Who am I forwarding it to again?
Yeah, yeah.
Leah?
Yeah, if you send it to me, I can edit too.
Okay, I'll send it to both you and Andrea, so both have it.
Space.
I think that could be technical. Okay, yeah. Okay, and so the first motion was by. And it is
To approve the inadequate and none columns of the rubric.
Yeah. How are you sharing on this too? It's gonna go in faster. Because I'm not sharing. So do you want to stop sharing?
Yep, I can stop sharing. And I am typing that into the motions document. So,
They have it. Last screen.
and you can go ahead and take that vote. So I have,
All right.
yeah,
Okay, so it's been put forward that we approve the inadequate and the none columns.
it does not, is that what it's
Sorry.
saying?
Yes.
So what I typed that you can't see right now is motion to approve the inadequate and does not,
No,
doesn't,
None.
and none column.
Mhm.
We just changed in the none column.
And
Doesn't
none.
to does not.
Not
Column.
N-U-N though.
Yes.
I
The
was
draft,
thinking that
the
too.
rubric in draft 3, right? And then I said, technical change doesn't to does not. Okay.
Correct. All right. Any other comment? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that was unanimous. Okay, let's move on to the adequate column.
It's not me sharing anymore. Whoever's sharing, can you make the columns bigger?
We'll zoom up on these columns
Yeah.
here. Okay, any comment or discussion for this column?
So we're just on the
First one.
first one, not the second. Okay, sorry.
This is the middle column, or
Yeah.
it's still working
Yeah.
from right to left?
Yes.
So on this, there's if you look at it in the top part and the bottom part that was worked on, that was kind of trying to cut down on, like, simplify it, right? Again, for these reviewers. And I think that the bottom part that was read, if you scroll down a little bit, yeah, that part was removed as well. And I feel like one of these may need to be in here to be helpful for the reviewers. I was thinking that saying, like, this material demonstrates respect for diverse socio-cultural identities, and then comma, and then start with, it provides opportunities to acknowledge and integrate the histories, cultures, and contributions to people of the United States, etc. I don't know if that's repetitive, but it feels like it needed to be in there. But I'm not sure if staff sees any issues with having it just be the part that is, if you feel like there needs to be an inclusion of either the top part or the bottom part into this adequate column to help reviewers give the scores.
At first glance of this version, the language respect for diverse socio-cultural identities and cultural awareness is specifically mentioned in the code itself. And since this is the adequate section, which was intended to align with those minimum criteria, I would argue for those two pieces of language to be incorporated in that section. And some point, it may not work as that first sentence, but I think those two terms would be essential to have there, since that is the minimum area where that material would be recommended primary. And then the bottom sentence that's struck just for function, the phrase diverse characters is mentioned in the inadequate section. Now it says that it does not include. So for structure within the rubric itself, perhaps it makes sense for that phrase of diverse characters to be in the adequate section in positive language. In the adequate column, I'm not talking about the extensive column yet.
That makes sense. So I would like to make an amendment to this draft 3 to re-include, to unstrike, this material demonstrates respect for diverse socio-cultural identities and diverse characters at the top.
And diverse characters.
So it'd say
Not
this
cultural
material
awareness.
demonstrates respect for diverse socio-cultural identities and diverse characters, comma, it provides opportunities to acknowledge, or just period, actually, it can be period. Since it is in code. I had that on my notes, in code. And then you can strike the rest.
This is continuing to be struck.
Yep.
Rest will be unstruck. This.
Except for and provides. It could be a period and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that work better with aligning the adequate piece of what is the minimum standards within the code?
I would say so. Cultural awareness is also mentioned in code. However, it's part of the core standard minimum requirement, so it would be embedded based off of alignment with the standard anyway.
Okay.
And provides needs to be deleted. And provides needs to be deleted.
Yeah.
Okay. So the periods.
So can I
Yeah,
speak?
go ahead.
This is where I was trying to figure out that balance piece. And the reason why I'm saying that is originally we said just put the language in, and we said, well, you can't do just the language because no one knows what that means. So if we put the language in there that no one knows what it means, it feels like, and I guess I'm arguing that to simplify would be this, that the Black section, because it's talking about integrating histories, cultures, contributions, perspectives of people from the United States and worldwide, and material accurately represents the cultures, languages, traditions, beliefs, values, and customs of people from diverse backgrounds. And then we've got, how that's represented. My understanding is that no one would know what that was unless we spelled it out. So I guess if you put that in there, that's fine. But like I said, the reason why we were spelling it all out is because people didn't know what the law was without articulating it further. I feel like we're replicating what we're trying to say, as if diverse backgrounds and diverse people and cultures isn't diverse unless we say diverse characters too. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm like, I feel like we're duplicating, and maybe it needs to be duplicated. I guess this body can decide that. I think we're adding more to it and more to it. And yet the conciseness, I feel like, of the Black section there really does provide that depth of knowledge. And then I do have another question. Is respect different than, I'm trying to figure out if respect is something heightened or if it's just a representation. Does that make sense? Are we then taking groups and there's a different treatment of the groups because we're saying we respect who? Does that make sense? Instead of saying an accurate representation, we're going to take the cultures, the languages, the things that are in different cultures and different and diverse backgrounds, and we're going to accurately represent them versus we're going to respect. That's why I took highlight. We're highlighting. So at what point do we start getting beyond and into the other parts of the law where we're actually prioritizing or promoting versus providing an accurate representation? That's my narrative. So you guys can, give some feedback in that.
So for clarity, I think it's a little bit of a flip to that, where the language in the code itself is respect for diverse sociocultural, and then the language piece that says accurately represents was my description of explaining to the public what that means. So it starts off with the law piece. Okay, this is the requirement based off law. What does this look like in practice? Well, in practice, that means accurately representing those cultures or languages or whatever the students are studying in that moment.
Okay, and I guess that's when I read it, that's exactly what I thought, meaning that we're saying that this is an accurate representation, and I'm sure that's why you put the language in there, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we're showing an accurate representation. Okay, well, I don't know what is. I'll take what others. That's good to that narrative and understand that you're trying to. And that's the other thing, though. I'm like, okay, are we duplicating our efforts? And maybe we're not. I don't know. I'd be interested in hearing what others are thinking about it.
Well, I was actually wondering, and to the definition, like explaining what it was, I wanted to say, could you clarify what they mean by the sociocultural identities?
Patty, can you pull up, or you're not sharing anymore?
Nope.
Oh, but okay, it's fine. I'll just read it from here.
It's in the slide. Correct?
Yeah.
Yes. So I was just going to pull up where exactly that is in the code itself. So the line for respect for distinct sociocultural identities is in 53E-4 2041, paragraph 5, sub BIC. And it's part of the list of minimum requirements that should be in the curriculum specifically, and the instructional materials specifically. And it is part of a more fuller sentence that says, an LEA shall implement an ethnic studies curriculum that at a minimum focuses on shared identities and honoring the unique cultural differences, including that each individual student has unique characteristics, the common elements that unite Utahns, and the respect for socio-cultural identities and themes, including cultural histories in the context of the United States and global history. So I just wanted you to understand like where that phrase comes from in the law itself. And then so for the respect for distinct sociocultural identities, I think impartially that connects back to the civic character education ones where they're teaching those character traits about respect in general, but also understanding that people are very diverse and unique no matter what their ethnic or personal experience is. And so having respect of understanding that those diversity points can be both social or cultural within people, and that like a big theme within identity is self-determination, and that your identity isn't something that is always forced on you, but something that you determine. And I think the sentence before that, where it talks about individual students have unique characteristics, it just speaks into expanding on that. We're not just talking about the pure characteristics of having respect or duty or honor, but the characteristics you have as an individual, whether it be socially or culturally.
Okay, well, we have a motion that to amend this material demonstrates respect for diverse sociocultural identities and diverse characters and strike and provides cultural awareness. Ready to take?
And on the bottom, is it what
That's
is what it be?
Yeah, take
That was
out the
already on the
bottom.
draft, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion?
It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah, good.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that was unanimous. Okay, any other for the adequate column? Okay, all right, let's move to the extensive column. And we'll open that for discussion.
Did you have anything there? I wanted to remove the bottom part. You can't list off enough diverse characteristics to adequately describe people. And so I think we've done that in the adequate. Is adequate the help me out here? Okay.
Yeah.
In the adequate. So if I feel like we did that piece there. I feel like the language and I think this was your language, right? I feel like it really does adequately cover, not adequately, but what's the next one? Extensive. It gives that extensive coverage, right? So that we're really meeting those things. And I feel like when you get to the bottom and we start trying to break out body types, complexions, age, right? And I know we're just giving examples, but it starts to get into what I would, you know what I mean? We're starting to kind of group people or putting them a name on them or a title on them. And I worry a little bit about that instead of really, I think we start losing that respect piece actually that we have articulated in the previous piece. So that's what I'd recommend.
Well, my question is, so I completely understand what you're saying because we could go on and on, but now after hearing your lovely explanation, that was so good. I was like, wow, that was perfect. This almost, because it does say, we do say real life experiences in here. I feel like we have the cultural part. I feel like we have the cultural backgrounds and cultural philosophies is both listed in here, but are we missing something that outlines part of that sociocultural cultural identities or anything that makes this material be extensive rather than adequate? in a reviewer's eyes to give it a 3 instead of a 2-point score. Because I don't know, I agree with not listing them out like that. But I wonder if there's a way to summarize, or include, because if I'm a reviewer, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, they have all of this piece. What makes it more extensive than the adequate? And I'm not seeing exactly there might be something missing in this column. But I'm not sure how to articulate that.
So the bottom sentence extends beyond like the cultural part, and we get into various body types and complexions. And I think that expands people's knowledge, and they kind of need to know, that's a need to know, a descriptor of how does this go beyond the adequate section. And I think those descriptors will help reviewers understand, okay, what is included in this area of people that we're really wanting to have represented in the materials.
So, okay, that makes sense. And so what you're saying is that the list, although it could be very extensive, is actually helpful for the reviewers because it helps define what.
That was the intent of that list, was to provide the reviewers with examples of what they're looking for beyond what is inadequate.
So it's helping define like what diverse is, what, like sociocultural is, what, yeah, okay.
Not necessarily defining what diverse is, but as you were mentioning, the language before that speaks specifically to cultural philosophies and epistemologies, which are terms and concepts that come out of the ethnic studies discipline itself, which is more focused on that cultural piece. But then looking at the social piece, giving reviewers hints of like, you should be looking for these different social aspects. They might include this, they might not include this. But I am personally open to adjustments to that sentence and how we describe those social areas.
So, and maybe that's really what's missing too, is some examples may include, and giving maybe some examples and not an extensive list, but something that kind of covers more outside of like race and ethnicity, but talks about those social pieces and also the identity pieces.
And I guess I'm back to my original argument from a little bit ago, but not today, but the focus of our instructional materials, and certainly this is one aspect, I keep hearing that, should be on the research that's, you know what I mean? That should be the focus. Will this help for the outcomes of students, right? There's I guess in my mind, there's a point where something's maybe overbaked, where it starts to lose the integrity that it has. And I feel like we're asking for those representations in the cultures, in the languages, in the traditions, in the beliefs, in the I mean, we're seeing that. I don't think those are restricted to one type of person. I think that's the very point of doing that. My concern is, especially with this particular language, is now we're starting to prioritize people, and even just some of the language that's just expressed here was like, we want to make sure that I don't know, I should have wrote it down. It's something like they are represented. And I'm not sure who they is, because it just depends on what you're teaching. If you've got a language arts program and it's including these diverse cultures, then I think you're going to see, I don't think you're going to see a single body type, if that makes sense, right? And I don't think you're going to see a single complexion, because every culture has different complexions and every culture represents different ages. So I'm worried that we're starting to get so maybe so worried that someone's going to be left out, that we've made it so that it really doesn't mean anything anymore. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like we've been able to kind of balance things out enough that we're really making sure we are being very thoughtful. But to me, this last paragraph becomes the point where we start losing the quality and the integrity that we've worked to build into that. For me.
I hear you.
So-
I hear you. There are some pieces though, and I think I get what you're saying. And again, I just keep trying to think of these reviewers and how they could potentially be like, oh, this is beyond adequate, right? And helping them with those examples. And I think the people with disabilities is one that's, I think, is a really great example of making sure that like that they also show that is oftentimes.
Don't we have that in it? There's a couple other spots to make sure that's in there. This is not the only location
Yeah.
that's at. So
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
From a PE person lens,
Yeah.
I really like the various body types because I think that's forgotten in culture sometime because, you know, we have a lot of photo editing and I don't want to get off on a different tangent, but for people to realize that, you know, the body types affects people in social areas
Right.
also. And so that's why I really like
So
that.
would you, and I'm just asking this question, that I think that's why the legislature put in the language they did, right? Without pretextual effort. In other words, an underlying effort. If we're only showing, I don't know what body type we only want to show, like in PE, right? That means that there's pretextual effort in it. I mean, to me, that implies that we're only describing one, right? There's a deliberateness to it, the photoshopping, whatever. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, I don't know. You guys can decide what you want to do.
I'm trying to find a middle here where like we make sure that we're helpful for the reviewers by giving them examples that aren't really covered in that first part of it, but without having to go into too much into the weeds or be like so specific that we're actually not being specific at all, right? That
Right,
we're-
or we're actually in the idea of including, we're actually excluding,
Yeah,
right?
right. So it's like saying like some examples may include inclusion of people with disabilities, various body types and ages, like just that even alone to me covers
Okay.
like more examples of how it goes beyond all of these cultural and sociocultural identities, but it also giving them examples that then when they're reading the materials, they're like, oh, this was so great. They showed a real variety of social examples, right? Not just, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for this discussion. I think it's really important to have this discussion because exactly what was stated. One of the things in here is the purpose of the document and the purpose of the document. So thank you for always going back to the reviewer. What is the reviewer going to do? And as a reviewer, so I don't know how many in this room have ever been a reviewer, in order to have that inter-rater reliability, the more that can be stated in these columns and the more the specificity that we can give back to a publisher that says why you didn't get the highest score. And we are consistent in that. So if there is even some type of a list that says some examples may include, then we would be able to go back one in the training and the document, because if we don't have any examples, the first thing those reviewers are going to do is they're going to come in and say, what are some examples of that? And so we're going to have to give examples anyway. But if one time we give some examples and another time we give others, then we might not have as clear of that inter-rater reliability. So by putting it and having that transparency on a rubric, then the public sees there's comments that could be included in it, and we'll be able to have that inter-rater reliability as well. And so just having something there, because that question will be asked anyway. And if it's not transparent, then it's not known to the publisher afterwards, or it's also not known. Again, these are just very few points. There could be hundreds of points depending on how many content standards there are. This is going to give 2-3 points right here. A book wouldn't not pass because they're in this area. What this would do is give information to an LEA as they select it, and they say it's a 2, and this is why it's a 2. And they're like, oh, that aligns with our LEA. It's a 3. That's why it aligns with, it's a 1. That aligns with our LEA. We're fine. And so this is just that informational purposes for them to then dive in themselves to be able to have that secondary review of at the local context.
That's great. And as you were talking, I was also thinking about when I was working on this, I was thinking about when I make a rubric for my assignment and my student is upset at me because they got a B instead of an A, I can go to the rubric and say, this is why you got a B and not an A, because you didn't include what was in A, right? So.
So are you suggesting something like examples may include people with this, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't like it. Okay, yep, I'm good with that. I'm good with the purple.
So we have
I'm sorry.
a change here that says some examples may include people with disabilities, various body types and ages. Okay, any additional discussion? Okay, so Member Real has moved that we change to some examples may include people with disabilities, various body types and ages. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Any additional work for,
Okay.
and do we want to keep going or do we want to?
Yeah, the far column, and Patty said there may be some structural things when they have to put into rubric, which they can work with. If we just need to not reference House Bill 261, it just needs to be the code. So,
And do we want to say instead, I don't know why we said the public education system, or should we just say the material? I don't know.
probably.
Okay,
Sorry, where are you?
right there. So that
Second, it says the public education system. It needs to say the material.
should
We
incorporate.
just copied over exactly what the legislature said, but it probably is more relevant to say
Yeah.
the material.
For a reviewer, yeah.
Is that a friend? Or do we need to vote?
I mean, I feel like both of these could just be friendlies.
Yeah,
I don't,
yeah.
so we could just
Like right there.
approve column and whatever this is.
So we
The
should
first
item
section.
both of those, right? The extensive and the.
Items is how it's listed.
I think we can just,
You can just do the whole thing if you
I think we can just do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Since there's, yeah. What is this one called compared to the other one?
So that's the section, the next section.
So
What do
it
you-
was originally called inclusive components, but the recommendation here is that it simply says ethnic studies. And then the item underneath it, it was called shared values, connecting the verbiage in both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I see now,
both.
sorry.
So scrolling down to the next section.
Yeah, but we could move to, I'll make a motion to approve the
First section.
inclusive components, or what now we're calling it ethnic studies, rubric 1. Or what, I'm not sure how we want to label it. Yeah, draft 3 as amended.
Section, yeah,
No, the whole thing now.
the entire thing. So
Just
draft
this.
2
Mhm,
Okay.
Of 3.
Yeah. of draft 3. Yeah.
And the,
So if we just say, amend column item to read and then copy that.
we don't even need to. I think we decided it was a friendly.
Just draft 3 as amended.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay, so the motion has been made by Member Real to approve the ethnic studies columns as amended in draft 3.
Thank you.
All right,
Draft.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
They don't want to do the other section. They're
Yeah.
good.
I gotta
They
go get
didn't want to
one
do that
first.
second section. So
Oh, do you have one?
I have one. No, it's the
Will
draft.
it go to
3
mine?
version
Yes.
of that
Okay.
section.
Link down my phone.
Oh, this one right here.
So they're not going to discuss that.
No, it's just this section is approved. Yes.
Okay,
But it's first.
all right, well, let's move on then to the next section of this of the rubric with the shared values and character
Yeah.
traits. And let's,
Section.
Oh, okay.
Just that. And that was all
Yes.
section, study section.
Thank you. We were
Yes.
thinking you just approved the whole thing.
Nope. Just
Okay.
no, just
okay.
the ethnic, yes.
Yeah.
We were like
Studies.
studies.
Yeah, no, just the first
I
one.
was giving bad advice. I was like, no, that was the whole thing.
Yeah. And then on this one, I feel like we can do the same thing if you would like, Vice Chair Green, because I like the none and add a quick columns, I think we could improve unless anyone has any issues.
No, I think that's great. I think that's very efficient. Okay, so let's start on column none. On the shared values and character traits, is there any discussion for column none?
Doesn't. I don't.
Yeah, change doesn't to does. Oh, we have doesn't not at least. one.
Doesn't not.
That means it does. Just a double negative.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
double
right.
negative.
Yeah, doesn't not.
Negatives equal
Yeah.
positive. Okay, that one's pretty minor. Anything else? Okay,
Does
I-
there.
So it's supposed to be does not,
Yeah.
not.
No, just
No,
does
just
not.
doesn't. Does not. Sorry.
Does not.
Yeah, doesn't, not.
Anybody want to move this forward? I can.
Both columns.
What,
Oh, do you
what
want to do the
changes
both?
did you
Okay.
have?
No, I don't, none on these.
Yeah, but, okay, yeah.
So we
Okay.
could move inadequate and none if you want to, unless Randy has any.
I don't think so.
All right, I'll move that we approve the none and inadequate columns as written in draft 3 under the shared values and character traits of the rubric. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. All right, let's move to the adequate column.
And I have just one amendment in this column.
Okay.
And is that it? Oh, yeah. Oh.
Remember,
Oh, you fixed it. Oh, okay, but, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that
So we're
works.
on the
Never mind. I have no
column.
comments on that one either. Jeez. Okay, so I was gonna put it right here, the materials.
Should I read this out or-
Focuses.
Yeah, so that everyone sees it.
But
But
it-
it- like it
okay.
does. I think that'd be good, yeah.
Okay, so there's no additional amendments to this. I'll go ahead and read this and we can call for a vote. The material focuses on the shared values of diverse people and communities, the common elements that unite Utahns, and displays some character traits in its imagery and content. It aims to cultivate character traits in students such as courage, leadership, intelligence, integrity, honesty, respect, morality, civility, duty, honor, and service, along with principles found in the Constitution. All right, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay, let's move on to the extensive column. Any discussion?
I think this is similar to the last one for me, the last extensive column on the other one, is that I wonder if we are missing that piece that is the social piece. So like education, income, occupation, right? Those again, the way that as a reviewer, you're going to say this is beyond the adequate and giving examples of that, because I like how it says that connect Utahns to the world. And then I like how it has the part from code about courage. I like this summary that's been added. The materials offer multiple evidence-based supplemental resources and opportunities for cultivating character. So we cover character and then we talk about the world, right? So that to me covers like ethnicities and also cultures. And then we have the character traits in there, but I'm wondering if this part about like what was included previously about education, income, or occupation is something that is needed in this column to then put it again into the more extensive category, giving it a 3 score instead of a 2 score. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Staff's only opinion is that because the language is so similar now between adequate and extensive for that list, that it might be a little bit more challenging for reviewers to see the difference. And we'd recommend that perhaps just a bit of restructuring to say, like that top part that says content goes beyond adequate. So it would include adequate as the base, and then whatever language is in the extensive part would be the part that the reviewer can look at and see, okay, that's what I need to do or look for to score it higher.
Could that be similar to what we did on the last one where it's some examples include?
Mhm.
Okay.
But just not where that list is almost identical and
So would you say then putting a period after, because I can kind of see what you're saying, the materials offer multiple evidence-based supplemental resources and opportunities to cultivate character traits in students, period. Right, and
think
then
that-
because the list is replicated, is that what you're saying?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that.
And-
It does look duplicative.
And maybe then what makes it adequate instead of inadequate is adding those, some examples may include education, income, occupation. I don't know if there's something else there. I don't know if this, because it is shared values and character traits, like that's what this rubric is. And so I don't know how we can articulate values and character traits in a way that works here. That could be another example. Because character traits to me, I understand, but maybe the value part, like other than the part that we have in the adequate column. I don't know if there's anything
But
else that we're missing.
And I'm going to argue that the shared values are actually those things that connect Utahns and the world together. That's what becomes shared values.
Okay, I like that.
It's so I think you're right, but I do think I think that the language they had there originally was just that that shared values are those connected pieces that helped, and it's just that it's the unifying. Well, we could put something in about the unifying language from the law if we wanted to.
Also, I think this part of the characters' personality or the characters' personalities and roles in the material. I don't know if we need to have that because that gives more of a description to the reviewers on what they're looking for. So
I think personalities is fine. I was also looking at the behaviors piece in that because that's where you really see character traits played out in an exemplary way is through behaviors. So I think through personalities and behaviors might be a good description.
yeah, I like that. Well, I think we need to say may include characters with a variety of personalities, behaviors, education, income, and occupation.
How would you describe behaviors though? Like, is that in written text? Is it through a picture? Like, how do you capture behavior in curriculum?
I think it's a combination. Like if going back to the item above where we were saying through examples of text and imagery, and like if there is an anecdote or a story that the students are going through within the context of whatever they're doing, they'll be able to judge like, hey, this person is doing something that's really honorable. And they can see that whether it's through the text or an image.
So would it be behaviors that illustrate the character traits? Is that what you're trying to say with
Yes.
behaviors?
Do you want to add that?
Yeah, if it's illustrative of the character traits, then I can see the behaviors. Otherwise, just behaviors themselves to me don't mean anything.
Yeah, it's confusing.
So that's why,
Yeah.
that's kind of why I took that out. I was like, I don't know what behaviors, what does that mean? But if it's illustrative, if we use that language, yeah, then you know what we're looking for.
Mhm.
So I can see that. If you magic person in the back, wizard, right?
And well, now this sentence.
Let's see.
Now the
examples.
sentence is a
Okay.
little chunky. Got all chunked up, but I think there's a way we can put it together.
Here's the illustrate.
Yeah. Income, occupation, or behaviors that illustrate the character traits. Can it be or is it and?
Examples.
examples is or.
listed.
Or, yeah, or.
Some examples of equal characters. Yeah, I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
I think we're there.
Same.
Okay.
One thing I noticed is it has a singular and a plural. Want to fix that, because this material is a singular, and down here it says the materials offer.
I feel like we can clean that up. However, it makes it, yeah, more. Well, it just, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. At the top.
Usually when we're reviewing, it's usually the material because it's one thing. So that's why we usually put the material instead of plural.
So that the top and then material singular down lower.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we have an amendment. Can I
you
go
moving
ahead and
that?
read it? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, you better
Okay.
read it.
So, could you start at the top there for me and I'll read through this when you're done. No worries. Okay, so the material extends beyond the content outlined in adequate. It includes elements that connect Utahns to the world. The material offers multiple evidence-based supplemental resources and opportunities for cultivating character traits in students. Some examples may include characters with a variety of personalities, education, income, occupation, or behaviors that illustrate the character traits. We feel
I
good?
think that landed well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All in favor for that?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Uh-oh. We're seeing some.
I was quick wonder, it says the character traits, so I was wondering if it should say just illustrates character traits or the character traits, because that would mean that the list in adequate would be the only list of character traits that this applies to.
Yeah, I'd say character, take out the.
Is that a friendly? We're taking out the before character traits.
You okay with that?
Hold. Second.
We're holding.
Yeah. Yep. I'm good.
Friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need to
Okay.
revote? No.
I think we're okay. Thank you. Thanks for that catch. Okay, great. So we have just worked
Wait,
on.
we have to move to pass the entire rubric now,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yep. Do we want to approve this section by itself or just go ahead and move the draft as a full?
I
Okay,
think we could move the draft as amended now.
okay,
I mean, we could do both, but
all right.
personally.
Member Earl, do you want to make that motion?
Yeah, I move that we move the full draft as amended, draft 3 to the full board for, I'm not reading this, saying this right. What am I missing? Second reading for first, what's our first and second reading thing? Sorry, not really.
For approval on second.
For approval on second and final reading. Move it to the board for the approval on second and final reading.
Okay, so it's been moved that we move draft 3 on to the full board on
As amended.
as amended on the second and final reading. Any other discussion towards this? All right, all in favor? Oh,
I just
Aye.
think, sorry, thank you for everybody for the thoughtful narratives and the engagement so that we can be considerate of, the full spectrum of things. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, all
Thanks.
right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good. And I want to echo Member Earl's compliment. Thank you for allowing us to engage here and work through on this subject as we do a deep dive nationwide and kind of see where things are landing and what that looks like for us. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to keep going? Just do it free.
I'm good. If you want to take over, I'm okay to.
Yeah, keep going. I think it's great.
Okay, great. Well, let's go to the next agenda item. We are going to move back to action item 1.3, the CTE course standards approval. Can have Talia Longhurst, are we inviting those up? And Jonathan Frey and CTE specialists that apply to the hot seat.
Why don't you decide if you want to start?
Oh, Well, let me bring this up real quick.
I personally want to start with the facts one.
We're trying to stop sharing.
You guys quit sharing.
You're too nice. We're looking at our emotions. That's what we can share.
It is trying to not share. Or not share on the other two screens, but we can start and do it on that far screen, but it's really small.
Andrea, the other thing is Lola's online today. She's sick, and so she's coming to us online. So we just need to, okay. I am not on Zoom, so.
Let me just save this and I'll shut down.
And if I may, while we're pulling up the details, I'll just go for those listening in. I'll just read the background here. So the CTE programs are approved annually through the consent calendar process as directed in R277-911-2. CTE courses make up these approved CTE programs of study. Following the board-approved CTE course revision process, approximately 1/4 of the courses are reviewed and updated annually through a program rotation calendar. After working with subject matter experts and business industry partners, the standards for these courses are being submitted to the board for approval. And we're working on bringing up the facts standards. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My glasses don't even help that.
Do you want me to share? I'm sharing on Zoom. Do you want to share on Facebook with us?
I can share. Yeah, okay, I don't have access to the documents, but I'll send it to you. It's in the G drive, that's where it's in the G drive. Everything is in the G drive.
Okay.
This is really like an informal break. Yeah. Sure.
Or Patty's gonna share. We can use. Yeah.
I'm on.
Okay.
Chair, would it be okay if I gave kind of an introduction as we've talked about some of the amendments that we've seen come from Board Member Earl?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. Talia Longhurst, Director of Career and Technical Education. Lola Ship Evans is our specialist over Family and Consumer Sciences. She is homesick today, but she is on Zoom and is available to chime in as we need her to, if she even has a voice today. So one of the things is Lola and I looked at these kind of proposed amendments. One of the things we want you to remember as you think about this, sometimes CT classes are a little bit different because it's not about teaching the student necessarily. This is not going to be a great example. But not necessarily teaching them basic math skills. It's about teaching them how to apply math towards career preparation. So when you think about this FCS exploration course, it's designed to be a 7th and 8th grade level course around career exploration for various pathways and careers that are related to what they'll potentially choose to study later on. So it's not meant, in the case of some of these strands that you're seeing, it's not meant to be a health class, although we hope that they'll learn something about themselves through the process, but it's also really designed to help them build a foundation of information that they can then translate to what it would be like to work in careers in these areas. So kind of keep that in mind as you talk through the amendments that you'd like to make. And one of the other options that we would throw out to you as you have your discussion is that we're happy to pull this course and take it back to our committee, understanding what are the things that you have concerns about, and rework it, leave the standards as they are today for the next school year, and bring this back a year from now. If you feel like it needs some rework, we're happy to do that as well.
Okay. Well, the recommended motion is that the committee approve the CTE course standards draft 1 and forward to the full board for approval. However, if there's any discussion there.
Yeah, the course I'm looking at is the FACS exploration, which is the 7th, 8th, right? 7th, 8th. So, and the particular one I'm looking at, I mean, if you look at, I looked at the 6th grade one, I looked at, this is just me personally, what is the intent of, and it's, as you've said, right? And looking at the course description, family relationships, personal responsibility, career and job related tasks. So as I went down through it, you've got strand 1, strand 2, strand 3, they're concise, you know exactly what's going on there. Same with 5 or 4, sorry. When you get to 5, and it's under human services, the social emotional skills related to human services, it starts getting into like I feel like we start losing the structure or the content. There's pieces of this, for example, a lot of the research around trying to build self-esteem in kids really, it doesn't really do anything. If you look at the historical research through the 80s and 90s, we had this big push towards self-esteem, and it really didn't increase self-esteem. I like I guess just looking at it, the goal focus, looking, beyond. This seems to be very self-centered when it comes to students themselves. So I guess I asked a couple of educators that actually teach this course and just tried to bring in looking at some different things. Now, you don't have to like what I recommended. Let me just say that right now. I was trying to think outside the student. I was trying to think about family, meaning that this is that family component in a broad sense, and then also incorporating in just some things that kids at that age could relate to, or at least would help them maybe look at some skills. So this is just my recommendation. You guys everybody can go, no, we don't like that, whatever. I'm not offended by that, but I would have started this particular strand something with students will explore family relationships and public health related programs. So it's actually refocusing back on potential job skills down the road. And then number 1 would just be really basic human development. Key milestones in different phases of life, from infancy to toddler to childhood to adolescence to adult to oh, did we change the language there to senior, right? Something like that, where students are actually they're looking at these different different generations, whatever you want to call them, phases of life, and saying, what are those phases? Why would we clump those together? And then looking at the supports needed and the challenges related to different generations, or it could even say different life phases of life. And then explain the role to different generations play in society, identify ways different generations support one another. Strand 3 would be this is taken right from what's currently there. It talks about long and short-term goals. And then perhaps the performance skills. And this is just a few recommendations here. It doesn't have to be these. Would be interviewing someone from a different generation, explore the key relationships they have with other generations. Some of those might be grandparenting. It might be elderly doctor visits, meals, holidays, work schedules. Those are just a few examples I threw in there. And then identify ways to strengthen bonds across different generations. What are effective ways to develop stronger relationships within your family? Plan, carry out an activity designed to include 2 or more generations. And then the last part of that would be explore local programs related to public health. And so it'd be, these are the different areas of public health, what's included in these. And of course, all those tie back to the original, the human development piece, because public health is about promoting the research and things about the well-being of the different cycles in life. When you go to this, when you go to a health department or whatever, they've got from immunizations to advocacy against maybe alcohol or drug abuse for youth. So trying to do just in a clump type of thing, these are possibilities. And then at the end of that, participating in some type of a service project that helps to improve quality of life within the community, create a public health message for one of the phases of life that helps to support the well-being of that age group, or a age group, one of those. Then it allows that focus to be back on the possibilities, future possibilities of job, looking at that type of a thing, which CT, I think, does that. Once again, this is just some ideas. And I don't know what the body's going to do, but I would recommend that strand is reworked in some way to include some of these. It doesn't have to include all. It could just maybe pay a couple of pieces. The other thing is if we decide to get some more feedback on that this month, it's just that one strand is the only thing. I don't think it needs to be delayed for a year. And I also don't think it's real responsible for us to just change it without any other feedback from the field either. I feel like that's, that we need that feedback, but I think we could put out recommendations. So that's just me. And I don't know who wants to give any feedback. I just feel like what's there currently, for these teenagers, it is okay to start looking outside of themselves. I feel like this was a very self-centered section, and it was overly worded too. And also, I don't really care for the philosophical view of the individual on there. That particular individual, when it came to think challenges in people's lives, he looked at it, challenges as leading to unhappiness. That was one of the philosophical views he had. And I'm a little nervous that suggests that challenges in life actually don't lead to growth, but they lead to, you know what I mean? It doesn't relate to a resiliency. And that's maybe the opposite direction we want to head with our teenagers. So anyways, those are just my thoughts. I'm welcome to whatever feedback from anybody here, including our CTE people. So
I would love to hear from you all. I mean, I having gone through and had member Earl explain all of this to me, it makes sense. It seems like a direction that works within the goals of this course and doesn't duplicate within health and other areas that is already covered. I just always look at if this is going to be a big burden for our educators, or if it's going to, throw things into an area that may cause them to be like, why are we going this direction? And what, any of those consequences or risks that go with this new look at this piece of the standard.
Well, my major was family and consumer science. And so, I mean, the thing that I appreciate about, well, let's start with standard 5 real quick. So I'm looking through strand 5. And it does heavily focus on the social and emotional skills, and those are good. I think I hold the same sentiments with member Earl in that it's here, but family is kind of here. And there were two things back in the day about the family and consumer science about like the social emotional thing, which wasn't called that at all. Like it just wasn't on anyone's radar to reference it that way. But one was learning about the dynamics of family structure. I think we read the problem with dibs or something like that. Anybody remember that book? Anyway, that was one that we read.
This is in my area.
It reports there. Okay. And then we did, I remember my professor shared this poem about a kite and this concept of a kite can't fly without a string, and the string. If anybody has that poem, will you please share it with me? I have been trying to find that poem since college. But it's the poem that the child is the kite and the parents are on the ground, and what ties them together is that family, and that, the care, love, stability, and values. That the kite can't fly without the string. The string can't have tight without somebody grounding it on the ground. And it was a really monumental moment in my education there. That was family and consumer science. And so I do like the idea of developing this so it ties it in. We have that unique opportunity here to bring more of what Member Earl was bringing in. So I would support maybe some further development. And I don't know if what you're saying, Member Earl, is that we hold this strand, work on that, move everything forward. I don't know if we can do that. Like what are the dynamics there?
Well, it wouldn't make sense to just pull a strand and approve everything else. We would want to hold the whole entire course.
Okay.
If I may, let me, and Lola's online, we're going to go to her in just a second. This is not my personal area of expertise. CT is a very broad thing. This is not one of the areas that I personally studied. But Lola will be able to respond to some of your thoughts. As she and I met yesterday to kind of preview and look at these, and I think overall, the changes that you've recommended are not anything that we would oppose. The only concern would be the things that are being removed. Does it weaken the course so that it's not a strong enough connection to future careers? That's the one concern. And Lola can speak more to that. The only other thing, if I could just speak directly to the proposed amendments, there was a concern at the very, very bottom of the amendments in one of the performance skills about participating in a service project. This is a semester-long course for 7th and 8th graders, and the concern was they wouldn't have enough time to actually accomplish that with the other performance skills that are really those hands-on components that we built in. So that was a thought, as to maybe if we remove that, the rest of the information that you've proposed, there's nothing wrong with it. It's good information. The question will be what's being removed and how does that affect the overall purpose of the course? So I'm going to stop talking. I know enough to be dangerous, and it is time for me to stop. So I'm going to turn it over to Lola.
So I'm so sorry, I can only whisper. So hopefully you can hear me, but the two things that I was a little bit leery about is the self-concept and self-esteem and the values pieces. Not in a, yes, students are going to take it personally, like they're going to apply it to themselves first, but the teachers should redirect and say, if a person has a healthy self-concept, that's how they can get over and that help them have more resilience with life's challenges and have a positive outlook and a positive sense of self. And the same with values. Even if my client has a different value system than I do, I need to understand that their values govern how they act and what they think is important. And so those are the two pieces that I would like you to consider.
If I may ask you a question, Lola, as well. So as part of one of our courses and as it applies to, well, how would this look like in a future job setting? Part of family and consumer science is also motherhood. And running a home, there's a home economy, and every person brings value to that economy within the household. So when those are traits that I feel like we could talk about, because those things spill over into every setting that you find, and there's this economy there that can be built and developed and fortified starting at home. And so even if children are missing some of those values, then they can be presented with, oh, this is what this concept is. So and on another point, as it applies to what would this look like, and if we're focusing on careers, but I also view who is this? My goodness, throw my phone away. Is like career days. I was invited to be a speaker at a career day like 2 years ago, and I was a mom. And I presented proudly on that, because there is this reality, and we had a fun little demonstration. There was like a taxi hat, and then a chef's hat, and then, all these things that we brought in that all of a sudden you can actually place what that person does into the external setting of the world. There are taxi drivers, that's their job. There are chefs, that's their job. So it ties all together to this concept of what family and consumer science is. Another area that I didn't necessarily see, which I think was a really fun, and it ties in to the age appropriate development. So member Earl had included the age development, which is super important as well. Was that missing somewhere else? Or was that in somewhere else that you knew? I was scrolling, I haven't been able.
If you look down in strand 6, they're about the early childhood careers. So I think the addition of child development, human development in this strand would be great. I think it would be great, and it would go right along with strand 6, which is the next one.
Okay. And I think I would just argue that a family is a career, and to value that as well. And we can build that in. So, I mean, without all the other millions of things that I that I probably want to talk about, I mean, I would move, if I could make a motion. Could we move to bring this one back and work on developing strand 5 and any other strands that we might be able to, that we see? That's a bad motion. Yes.
Do that. My question is, would we approve what's currently there so that it can continue in the next semester as it is, with the understanding that we're reworking it so that the next time that it is offered, because it'll be offered in January.
These
It
would-
won't be.
These
Oh.
would not be effective until
Okay.
next school year
Next school
anyway.
year. Okay.
We
Okay.
don't change in the middle of the year.
All right. So do we have time to take that back?
So my recommendation, Lola, I'm looking at you, shake your head if I'm wrong, but my recommendation would be that we just pull this whole course and we'll bring it back a year from now. It'll be a little outside of its normal cycle, but we'll put it back in because we do full pathway course sequences at one time, but we'll put it back into its normal cycle after that. But we'll bring it back next year, and we'll leave the standards that exist today, the teachers are currently teaching, in place for the year until we come back next year. Lola, you're in agreement. Thank you.
And when you say next year, is that
Next
the
November.
2025? Oh, November.
25.
Okay.
So you don't think we can, in the next month, work through and find something to recommend?
Lola, what's your preference?
Because I think a simplification, I'm looking at the values piece. Yeah, sure, we don't have to do the service project thing, right? These are just suggestions that kind of related. Or even, to be honest with you, the performance measures up above. I listed several ideas. You don't, normally you have 1 or 2, right? And so it would be cleaning that out. I just don't, Okay, and then you had recommended the values. I think if we could simplify the values section, I don't have a problem with that. People talking about things that they value, right? And how that impacts their life. I think that's good. Although I think it's way overdone here. And just because someone values something does not mean that they're self-reliant. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's a few things here. I'm like, I don't know if this is true. Just because you value something does not mean you have peace of mind or you won't have legal problems or whatever. But I do think that simplifying that. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think there could be some work done and have it ready to go by January.
Lola.
But Lola, you feeling well enough to work on something?
December is always tricky, but I think if you're willing to, I'd love to work with you and get this done.
Yeah. And other board members too, I don't feel like it needs to be just one, kind of like instructional materials. We did, have a couple of meetings and just kind of hammered through things. I feel like that could do that. And then it's ready to go. We don't have to try to
So
do
my
anything.
one suggestion, given that it's the holidays and Lola will need to connect with post-secondary and some of our subject matter experts, maybe allow us some flexibility. If we can have it ready for January committee meeting, we'll bring it back. If we need to wait till February because of the holidays,
sure.
if you would allow us that flexibility. That way she can connect with the.
But it needs to be done at the first of the year. We don't want to drag it out because of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't think we'll need to. I really just think there's some basic, I don't know, foundational, like other foundational things that we could just bring into that.
Yeah.
And if I can share one more thing, one thing that was so impactful as well that I learned in our family and consumer science class, you had to do this meal plan. So you buy the loaf of bread, you buy the peanut butter, you buy the jelly, you measure out those ounces, you divide that by the cost of the food. You know how much that peanut butter and jelly sandwich is. I still use that I calculate those things in my head. And I think kids would just have a heyday with that. Not saying that we're going to put that in. Anyway, I'm just throwing it out. There's this really fun, really relevant world that exists in family and consumer science that I think 7th and 8th graders would just thoroughly enjoy. So just again, sparking that fun and enthusiasm and excitement of what this course could offer.
I believe in measuring with your heart, but aside from that, if I could just remind you, just for you to keep always in your mind when you're thinking about CTE courses, is this is one course in a full sequence. So we won't cover every single thing that you all talk about and that you value and that we value as well. But within a sequence of courses, we're going to hit those things. So don't fret, don't stay awake at night if you may not see exactly what you're hoping for in one course, because within a sequence, it is there. So
could we have that be part of our discussion too, is a sequence then for like what that looks like?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
We can just touch on that for a minute then.
So do you need a motion just for that then, that one is just, you've got it there.
Okay. So the recommended motion that the committee approve the CTE course standards draft. Oh, no, not yet.
The one she's
Sorry.
typing.
This one right here.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
done.
I would recommend that we bring the FCS facts, you just say facts though, right? Course back to a future standards and assessment meeting for, I think it could go, does it need to come back to a future meeting here? I think maybe it does.
Yeah, I would bring it back to the committee.
Standards and assessment meeting for review and approval.
Okay. Oh, it just disappeared. Do I need to read that again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
Good luck.
The screen's going crazy.
There's something, yeah.
Oh, let's do this one. All right. The motion is to bring the facts exploration course back to a future standards and assessment meeting for review and approval. All right. No more discussion. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. Okay. Passes unanimously. All right. Moving on. Are there any other?
Thank you for pulling the apprenticeship. Even though I'm fine with that, I just didn't have a time to fully look at that. So I didn't want anybody to go into panic with that. But anyways, and then just the teaching as a profession for me, I still don't understand why we're reteaching how to do basic math and basic. I get it. We're trying to get kids to pass the test, right? That's what I understood, is that in order to pass the test, we're going to review the content for that. I just have a hard time when we get to, you're in high school and you can't do some basic math.
So this
So-
this course is aligned to the praxis test so that it's
yeah.
preparing students to be able to take the praxis. Again, remember to make the shift that we're not necessarily teaching the students math, we're teaching them how to teach math.
Is that what it says?
Now, again,
I
I know
didn't
enough
take
to
it
be
that way, but let me
dangerous.
look.
Let's bring it.
Remind me, it's under education and training, right?
Yes.
So page 244. Let me find that course. Yeah, so I'm looking on page 250. I'm just looking. Says mathematics. Students will demonstrate mathematical concepts and ability to apply to abstract and real life situations and apply the 3 categories of math skills. Okay, so that I can see that at the end in a classroom setting. So, but then it's comprehend the 3 categories of math skills. Perform basic addition, subtraction. So it's measuring and them teaching students this?
Board Member Earl, if I could speak.
Yeah.
Ashley Higgs, CTE Education Specialist. So how the committee designed this course is strands 1 and 2 aligned to the para-educator
Yeah,
document approved by USBE. And then just like we've said, strands 3, 4, and 5 are the standards within the para-pro praxis. Again, we did not want to teach kids remedial math. So the performance objective is using the tier 1, 2, and 3 outlined in the para-educator document to have them creating lesson plans to address those different tiers in teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic that they would need to know to pass the para. So yes, the standards are teaching quote unquote remedial math, language arts, and or reading, writing, and arithmetic. But what the performance objective is that they're taking the tier 1, 2, and 3 and being able to teach and adapt so that kids understand those concepts in order to pass the para, but to also get those educator skills that they would need as a para and moving towards being an educator in the classroom.
Okay. I can see that under
So
the
it's sort of like-
performance skills. Yeah.
I do know fractions, but
How would I teach that?
I might need a reviewer on fractions if I'm going to be teaching it, right? To remember those basic
Okay.
concepts.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any recommendations for changes. I was just trying to understand. And the performance skills, as long as it's not just instructional strategies, but it's actually instructional strategies that are effective, right? And I'm assuming, maybe that's an assumption that, of course, the assessment's going to have effective strategies.
And to also, this is the 4th course within the K-12 teaching as a profession pathway. So
Okay.
hopefully they're doing the progression of it, and this is the last thing that they're doing so that in aspiring educators and principals of educational instruction and even the teaching as a profession, they're doing the observations, they're going out and teaching, doing mini lessons, that sort of thing.
Okay. I don't have anything else with it. So they're both, and the data and analytics too. I don't have anything with that, the apprenticeship or K-12 teaching as a profession capstone.
We should just.
Okay. The keyboarding, still some questions. So, okay, I'll make the motion that, that the committee approved data analytics, apprenticeship, K-12 teaching as a profession capstone, draft 1, and move to the full board and forward to the board for approval. So it's those 3 areas that were still out there. I still have a couple questions with the keyboarding one before we move that one on.
I'm good with the other ones moving on though.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see, capstone down. Yeah, those are the 3. It's the very last one on the whole thing.
Other.
It's the
Okay,
last one.
so we have a motion from member Earl that we move the committee approve K through 12 teaching as a profession capstone, data analytics, and apprenticeship, and forward to the full board for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passed unanimously. Okay, and I think we're going to open discussion for keyboarding, elementary keyboarding. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Page 554.
So on this one, I talked with Randy about this. His wife apparently has created materials to be used previously. I don't know if they're still used throughout the state. Whoa. Okay, there we
Oh,
go.
no.
Hold on. I think I got it. Destroy my computer. Thank you. It's a mom move. Thank you. I know that was a mom move. Is that in your class, your CTE? Yeah, that was good.
Is your computer okay?
Yeah. I think it was just on the top part. Thank you. Anyways, Randy just sharing some of his. I guess I'm just going to share my thought. I just want us to be careful that this does not take over so much time that it takes away from the classroom time, right? And I don't know if you listened yesterday, but we had a debate on five, you know what I mean, taking 5 classes to do assessments for kindergarten, and the argument being, or 5 days, sorry, 5 days, thank you, that how important that instructional time is, and making sure that we're, and trying to get a whole bunch of things done, that we're not just adding more. And I understand everybody's on the computer, so that's the reality, right? That there's access to technology. So just making sure it's balanced. And I don't really have any recommendations in this section. More than a discussion is maybe what that needs to be or not be, but just making sure we're not over spending time on something. And I guess for me, it's in those younger grades. And I realized it's very simplified in the younger grades, but how much time should we be spending there? Because by the time you get to 3rd and 4th grade, that's when developmentally they're ready for more of the keyboarding skills. And I know they're pretty basic in kindergarten. I'm not recalling on the 1st and 2nd. Those are just my thoughts. I just want to make sure we're really being thoughtful about that time in the classroom and not just adding one more thing that developmentally in a couple of years is going to come anyways. So, but those are my thoughts. And I know Randy has some pretty good thoughts about it too. So
I would just like to comment that I feel that the standards are well conceived, and that they are preparing students for the 3rd grade with basic cautions and behaviors and skills that are very rudimentary, but that have to do with posture and home row keys and all of the little basic things that they can learn when they're still young before they develop bad habits. So then at 3rd grade, we have to spend too much time breaking bad habits that they've just been using index fingers to try to hunt and peck and figure things out. So they just get a few little nuggets here and there, and they start learning about posture and how that, and feet on the floor and all those different kinds of things. Just a little nugget here and a little nugget there, and reminders. And then when it's time to really dive in at the 3rd grade, when their fingers are ready to go to work and they can understand which hand is the right hand and the left hand, and they can use those to accomplish what we're going to ask them to accomplish, then they can really take off. And the instruction, I've been intimately involved in instruction and observing in Nebo School District classrooms full of 3rd graders just absolutely going crazy with amazing skills, and then to be able to review that and reinforce what is taught in the 5th grade. what was taught in the third grade, I think is just a very valuable approach and should end up providing us with students who are really ready to keyboard efficiently and throughout the rest of their career as students. So I'm very supportive of the document as it's been given to us. And the only thing that I would wish is that every LEA, every charter would figure out how to find time. This among the other content areas besides literacy and numeracy, this one often, because it takes some time and because it takes some resources, and it usually would require them to be moved out of their classroom into another space where they can, and just making that happen with the numbers of third graders that we have, it just doesn't always happen in all the schools. So some of my grandchildren in certain schools are not getting it, and it drives me crazy to watch them be as inefficient as they are when with one little term or quarter or whatever you call it in elementary school of this kind of training could set them up for great success, particularly in the writing area. I get so concerned that because they're so concerned about managing their fingers in the keyboard that they're not thinking how to communicate as a writer. And so I'm very supportive and grateful for the good work that the team has done with Ashley to get these standards to where they are now and where they've been for some time. But boy, if there's any way to reemphasize, this is a good thing, and every child in Utah ought to have this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Are we making any kind of amendments to this? Do we want to move this forward? What are we thinking?
Would you like Ashley just to give you some reassurance about how this works in elementary schools? Ashley
Higgs, CTE Education Specialist, just because it's a new topic. So typically what we're seeing within the LEAs is that they're typically spending approximately 30 minutes a week, if that, between that to do it. And so knowing that information, when the committee came to create the standards, we were at a grade band. So we had it by the end of second grade, this is what's every second grader should know. And then by the end of fifth grade, this is what every fifth grader should know. And we wanted to give something a little bit more useful to an LEA so that they weren't in kindergarten thinking that they should be typing or composing at a computer. And so the committee was very thoughtful in grades K through 12, all of it, or excuse me, K through 2. It was introducing them to proper technique. It was exploring. It was discussing, why do we have passwords? Why do we not share passwords? That sort of thing. And then in third grade is when they start to demonstrate, when they're actually composing at the computer because of the hand-eye coordination. Fourth grade, they're going to develop, so hopefully getting a little bit better. And then by fifth grade, they're mastering. So when they do the performance test to show whether or not they can key by touch. And then we included sixth grade because we do have some elementaries that have sixth grade and they're like, what should we do in sixth grade? And we basically said they're going to apply it to what they're doing in language arts and what they're doing in typing their papers and things like that. And so I think the committee was very thoughtful in what the skills were for each grade and assuring that it wasn't finding that happy balance between learning letters and writing and composing sentences as well as typing.
Okay. I have a question just that has to do with the typing. I know that a while ago, some test results, end of level testing was coming back, and I think it was in the fourth grade. And they were saying that the students weren't performing at the levels they were hoping, but that they isolated it down to the fact that they couldn't type that fast. And so then the discussion started like, well, we should have the typing be bumped to like third and second grade. Are we there? I don't agree with that. I think they should handwrite it, but I was just wondering if anybody knew that situation. And if not, that's okay.
I can't attest to what the test results were, but I can tell you that research says to not start having kids compose at a computer until grade 3, just because the hand-eye coordination isn't there. So I would highly recommend not bumping it up earlier, just because of developmental issues or
So
things,
is the
but as far-
typing, are there typing tests in grade 3 that is end of level tests that we know of?
Yeah, it is.
It's not a typing test, but it's a computer-based test. So the students provide their typing on the keyboard of the test.
Yeah.
There's some free response. It's not an essay, but there's some free response built into that, a small amount.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, should we move, are we going to move just the keyboarding or do we want to move?
I think that's the only thing.
That's the only
left.
one? Yes. The only one left. Okay. All right. Well,
Randy, do
the
you wanna
motion
read the
is,
keyboarding?
Great. I move that the committee approve the elementary keyboarding course and forward to full board for approval.
all right, it's been moved that the committee approve the elementary keyboarding course and forward to the full board for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate your time.
I thought last time when we did all those CTs.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's call for a 5-minute break.
What's the next one? The rules?
Yes, we'll work on item 1.4. All right, we're back. So we are now on agenda item 1.4, correct? Okay, R277404, requirements for assessments of student achievement amendment. The agenda memo. Well, do you want me to read that background? UA. Sure. Yeah. So UA plus, Utah Aspire Plus and kindergarten changes, including revising the early reading grades to K through 3 and to remove ELA from Utah Aspire Plus. And the recommended action is that the committee approves R277404 requirements for assessments of student achievement, draft 1 on first and reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Yeah, and anybody that would like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. So I'm Sid McCarty. I'm the Director of Assessment and Accountability. The background, just a teeny bit of a change there. With the background, it actually says to remove ELA from Utah Aspire Plus, and that's misleading. It's to remove the English assessment from Utah Aspire Plus. We're still planning on administering the reading portion. So the rule change is correct, and it's just removing that line of English, but keeping math, reading, and science as part of the Utah Aspire Plus. And then with the K and 3, that actually is addressed in Rule 406, and that's already been changed. So there's just a small change in Rule 404, and that's just removing the English portion. And that's due to the changes in our ELA assessment, that those language standards that were previously being assessed on the English portion of the Utah Aspire Plus are now more aligned with our writing standards. And since we don't have writing in that assessment, we're removing that English portion of the assessment for Utah Aspire Plus.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna, I understood why we were removing it, but I just had hoped it for the public that you would explain it, and you did perfectly. So.
Okay, perfect. All right. I think that's this is an easy lifter, right? Okay, anybody want to make a motion there?
I can. That the committee approves R277404 requirements for assessment of student achievement, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay. It's been moved that the committee approves R277404 requirements for assessments of student achievement, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes unanimous. Okay, now we'll move to agenda item 1.5, R277606, Dropout Prevention and Recovery Program. Thank you, by the way.
We have, Benji is online to help Elise with this agenda item.
Okay, so Benji Carrier's online. Thanks for being here. The recommended action is that the committee approves R277606 Dropout Prevention and Recovery Program Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Do you have any discussion? Or any comments on that?
I would move that the committee approves R277606 Dropout Prevention and Recovery Program Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did like that. It was called UTREX. UTREX.
UTREX.
I just like that. My second favorite acronym after PEEP
is UTREX. Love it. All right, so now we are on agenda item 1.6. R277607 absenteeism and truancy prevention. Okay, and do we need to have anybody?
Benjamin's on there as well.
Benji is also here. Yes, Benji, would you mind speaking to this?
Sure. Benji Carrier, a member of the attendance team here at USBE, and of course, Patty Norman's best friend. And so with this, we're just updating in our board rule some of the changes that happened in statute in last legislative session. We're primarily adding definitions and some clarity as I know, as some of you know, attendance, it seems like it should be super simple, but it's actually pretty complex when you get into how to appropriately and accurately mark attendance. And as we're trying to support the reduction in chronic absenteeism, my team feels that it's important that we have as much clarity as possible to our LEAs so that we can have the most accurate data possible so that we can make the best data decisions that we can.
Okay. I do have concerns on, let's see, let me find the line. Okay, on valid excuse, 64 and line 64 and 65, where an illness which may be either mental or physical, regardless of whether the school-age child or parent provides documentation from a medical professional. Does that mean that you require documentation from a medical professional if they call in with an illness?
No, you don't. We don't require that, and that's taken directly from statute, by the way. So this isn't language that we wrote. However, at the bottom of that valid excuse, there is kind of that caveat that LEAs can make adjustments based on their, on their board.
Okay.
But that is what statute suggests, is that you do not have to provide medical documentation.
Okay. When I first read it, I was thinking that it was. I'm like, that is impossible. Anyway,
Yeah,
just had to clarify.
It creates inequities for some families that don't have access, and especially as you get into rural areas. We had a case earlier this year that was handled by Garrett, where the nearest doctor was like 2 hours away, and so they were asking if they had to drive 2 hours to get a note that said, yeah, your kid had the flu, and then bring that back. And there's just no reason for that.
Very good. Thank you. I agree. Okay, is there?
I would move that the committee approves R277607 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay. All right. Do I have to read that again? Just okay, let's do it. All right. So the motion was made by Member Booth that the committee approves R27607 draft 1 on the first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're wrapping up quick, guys. Okay. So we have already done action number 8. So the last one we are at is action 1.7, R2777623, School Climate Survey Amendment and Continuation. We do have 2 drafts here. Are we removing draft 2? Let's see. Hold on, let me check some.
Have Willie here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Vice Chair Green, if I can speak.
Yes, please.
So my name is Willie Chen. I'm the School Safety Data Analyst under Chantel Cota, Director of the School Safety and Student Support Services. There's a new title, it's long. But the explanation for the 3 drafts are that, because I believe Deputy Newey is in law and licensing. So the first draft was some general changes to streamline some recommended practices for LEAs who choose to administer the survey. And then when we were reviewing that, I found some additional, maybe minor errors or grammatical things. So that's where draft 2 comes along. And then draft 3 is another option where, due to House Bill 182 student survey amendments, the school climate survey is now no longer optional. And so draft 3 offers the, or sorry, is optional, is no longer required. Thank you. And so draft 3 offers the option to repeal this rule. So that's why you see 3 drafts.
Okay, I only see 2 on my
I only
end.
see 2 as well.
The other is the repeal.
It's there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Instead of a draft.
Yeah, I can show.
Oh,
you.
repeal. I see
So
now.
here's the
Okay.
repeal right here. It's just everything is struck. One has those initial changes, draft 2. More, and then the full repeal. Oh, I wasn't sharing every time.
So
I saw.
what draft are we moving then?
So
Or-
that is
So
left
this
up to
is-
you as a committee. And in working with the staff, we recommend. Oh, people. Yeah. Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement. That is up to you as committee members to decide which draft to move forward. In reviewing it, that repeal is something that is probably, would you do that as the recommendation? Or yes. Elise Nui sent a message to, or an email to the committee that
Okay.
outlined those 3 changes yesterday within that
Oh,
message.
yesterday.
I haven't been reading my emails much in
Yeah.
these meetings.
Yeah. And she usually staffs this committee. And so just also an acknowledgement of her new position as Deputy Nui. So she's now in law and licensing.
So she said, as staff and I were reviewing this rule, we could not see why this rule was statutorily necessary anymore, as the climate survey is no longer required by statute. So we wanted to provide a few options for the committee so that you could all have a full range of policy options in front of you. Draft 1, minimal changes. Draft 2, as staff suggested, edits 3, repeal of the draft. So I guess I was reading your words aloud from the email. Yeah. I would just like to understand why, although the climate survey is not required, right? Is it still important for us to have a rule that exists?
So this is a tricky question, I believe, with a complex answer and situation. So I can provide at least some context because also Director Chantel is coming on her way. So the general purpose of the school climate survey was to gauge how the school environment is. And with what you were asking about, what are some of the ramifications if we don't offer anymore? Or if there are in general, one could say that the most immediate thing is right now there's a public dashboard available that says, if a parent or anyone in the public is interested, how are schools doing? That dashboard is now it essentially right now is rendered not as useful because it's no longer required. Some other things to think about is right now House Bill 84 has required a lot of school safety components. And because right now the school climate survey is not required, it is a little bit more difficult to try to assess safety when you can't, or when schools and LEAs are no longer required to administer at least our model that we provide to the LEAs. LEAs are still allowed, or still can, and are still expected to administer some type of measurement to update their policies and inform their data, though. It does not have to be, though, the USBE school climate survey now.
Right.
So that is what House Bill 182 changed specifically.
Right. It seems like my gauge from talking to my LEAs, the safety, I've talked a lot with them about 84. And to me, logically, this is where the legislation maybe isn't completely thought through in some ways, is that in order to keep schools safe, we need to understand the climate, right? We need to understand the climate of that school. Are there issues? Are there things that are arising within a certain school community that could cause concern? And I think school climate surveys do that. So it's unfortunate that it's not required anymore, but from gauging my LEAs, I think that they find value in the school climate survey. And I'm not sure if we know statewide how often they're still administering a school climate survey. And if we feel like overwhelmingly there are plenty of LEAs across the state that are administering school climate surveys, although it's not required anymore, if it is important to still have that rule.
I would just say to that the board and this agency has a lot of tools in their tool belt, right, for supporting LEAs and their requirements. And a rule is one of them. So right now, this rule has no teeth per se. There's nothing in it that requires things of LEAs. Essentially, all of the clauses say, if an LEA chooses to do it, here's how they shall do it, which is helpful. And I think it provides a lot of best practices, how to administer surveys in a reliable and valid way. And that's important. But I think the policy choice here is, do we want this in a rule, or would we rather have guidance or training or use some other tool that the board has at their disposal to provide that same support?
Okay, question, follow up on that. Is there, are there restrictions, however, so okay, let's say we did the guidance, and we went from the policy perspective, we went for a guidance rather than having a rule in place, right? It's just like, if you want to, then, right? If we did that, does that give LEAs the flexibility and freedom to administer their school climate surveys? But are there still restrictions statutorily that they need to follow, other than like they need to have the permission and things like that, that we probably already have in a rule somewhere else, right?
I think the best way to answer that would be ultimately statute and code itself in 53G8802 states that, let me read the specific line. Nothing in this section requires an LEA to use the model school climate survey or any specified questions. So we can provide as much guidance as possible, but ultimately statute says they don't have to do.
Does that also mean they can do what? Okay.
It ultimately gives them the ultimate freedom to do whatever they want with the survey, which could then, again, going back to that currently publicly available dashboard, how useful will that data be going forward as well?
I have one more question on this. Sorry. Okay, so great. That's perfect. I am now wondering, however, if staff feels like they hear from a lot of LEAs with like needing that guidance, needing that training when it comes to their school climate surveys, or if they just have it on lockdown and they're just giving it out every year and they have that all kind of figured out. So I'm basically trying to understand if there is a necessity for a rule, or a necessity, or the need for a guidance and training or something set up from the state office to provide support for these LEAs if they are choosing to, in their own flexible way, administer a school climate survey.
Yeah, so we currently have always provided support whenever we administer the survey. So for those who do choose to administer the survey this upcoming session, actually, because it's 2025 one is coming up, we are going to be reaching out to support them.
Okay. As board members, because you do reach out to them, what is it more supportive for staff and their connection with the LEAs to have the guidance, or is it helpful? Does the rule outline a lot of that guidance? And so.
Hello, Chantel Coda, Director of School Safety and Student Services. What makes sense is the guidance and the technical assistance for LEAs. We're finding that some districts and schools are reaching out to us and saying, hey, we still want support with the school climate survey. And some are saying, we just have, student surveys and we want guidance on that. And just as a side note, we have provided support on its House Bill 182 student survey amendments, going back, Board Member Real, to your question, I think earlier, just as a overall policy and support in that area. But in specific regard to the school climate survey, what might make most sense is the technical assistance and our team continuing to support schools that do want to administer that in best practices moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I am always down for less rules. So that's probably where I stand after you guys answered my questions. Thank you.
So your recommendation, just to be clear, is that we repeal this rule and then just provide technical assistance as needed as by the LEAs.
Thank you for that. We can move forward without the role in providing technical assistance. Yes.
So who formulates the school climate survey?
The USBE School Climate Survey is something that was created here by staff. There was a work group before my time that came together and pulled the questions together. And then Willie's team, who's the data analysis, supports with just the actual like Qualtrics form and the technical support of allowing schools to utilize that survey, the mechanism, if you will. And then the content was created here with the school climate survey not being required. Schools can certainly, take a menu of those questions and certainly create something on their own. We are equipped to support with the survey as it is, and certainly can help with like the Qualtrics forms and setups and so forth, if that's something that schools would like us to do.
So with the new law and not requiring a school climate survey, did I say that right?
Okay. The technical thing is it does not require LAs to use the USBE created school climate survey. There's still a requirement to use some type of measurement to assess the general school environment.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be a school climate survey. It can be an
and
assessment.
that which is where it says on line 21, it says school climate survey capitalized and or climate survey lowercase. That those are kind of interchangeable. That's what it's referencing, correct? So the capitalized one is from USBE.
Yes.
Okay, and then the lowercase is anything that an LEA, it's okay, might form or create by themselves, correct? So, I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know, good recommendations in this rule. Have we gotten feedback on LEA saying we don't like it?
Can I add one thing? Sorry, this is tangentially related. The only thing I wanted to bring to your attention. So subsection 3 is the incorporation of that model survey. And so that makes the model survey itself, if LEAs choose to use it, have the same power of rule, right? So it gives you as the board the power to review that and approve of that survey. So that would be one implication of repealing this rule today, would be that would no longer be part of the rulemaking process, is for that rule or that survey to come to you for review. However, that does not mean that that's the end of the road. One option would be to take that and put that maybe into like our student survey rule and have a clause that is for the model. Since most of this is now guidance, that's probably the only part that really is like a binding legal implication. And so we could put a clause into our student survey rule that incorporates this survey, this model survey by reference.
That makes more sense to me. That's kind of what I was asking earlier, is like, are there pieces, and it seems like in code, there's that freedom. But it seems like rather than having its own rule, integrating the climate survey into our survey rule as like to give us that option if board members do want to approve those surveys, which I don't want to, but that's my personal opinion.
So the student survey is different than a school climate survey. And I'm only asking that question because when you say we could take part of this and roll it into the student survey rule, how are those different?
Great question. So the student survey rule applies to any survey that's given to students. So LEAs sometimes, ask data about, how much they do homework at home, like those kinds of things. And so that rule pertains to all surveys that are given to students. This one was just specific to the climate survey. And so we could add a clause to the end of the student survey, like, here's all the things you need to know about giving surveys in your LEA. And here's what you need to know specifically if you're going to use our model survey, our model climate survey. Does that make sense? Sorry, I wasn't clear.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying to put all these surveys in order in my head.
So what should the motion be?
I put two things up here.
Yeah, we could do the motion to repeal the rule and to ask staff to include a clause in our student survey rule about the climate survey.
And so I did one as a motion and one as direction to staff just to do
Right.
that work and bring it back, but it could all be a part of the motion itself.
Why is there a difference then between a school climate survey and a student survey? Because I don't know that a climate survey, I don't know, help me understand, would fit underneath a student survey rule. If the climate survey is intended for a specifically, like a completely different reason or a more specific reason, like, I guess I like to think in boxes. So if they need to be separated, then I would support keeping the rule. The climate survey, this one, R2776623, versus having that, bumped into something that's intended for different purposes.
So that's a good question. So I think at this point, this was kind of a new idea that came to me just now about removing that incorporated piece. So apologies for not having this totally thought out. But I think the motion could read to direct staff to find another rule where it fits, that we can put subsection 3 and the incorporation, so that we don't have to have a rule that just has an incorporation. Or we can get rid of rules. That is also an option. We can just repeal it completely. But if you wanted to keep that line, direct staff to bring in January a rule where it fits well, or a few options. So then that way you have the ability to do that kind of questioning.
Right.
But we're just not ready right now.
Yeah. So when you say subsection 3, does that read for survey accommodations? Is that the section that you're talking about? I'm trying to line that up with what's in front of me. I'm on draft 2.
So it would be incorporation of required school climate survey questions by reference. Is the title of the subsection? Yeah. Line 31 of 623. Is that correct?
That's 2.
Just 1 or 2.
Okay. I would prefer to have that brought back. So if I'd like to make a motion, I think. Did we write that one down?
This is what I did. So tell me how to change it.
I'm not comfortable. I don't want to repeal. Personally, I don't want to repeal it yet. I would like to have that discussion and then decide. And I think it comes down to, are those two completely different things that need to be approached in completely different ways? Because the way I understand it is that they are.
But isn't the school climate survey a student survey?
I can answer that if I may speak.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking too. Yeah.
So there is some confusion with the language. There is a statute and code. I forgot the number, but there are a list of prohibited topics, or at least topics that need advanced parental consent regarding student surveys for across the state. Separately, the school climate survey surveys multiple groups. One of the groups is students, broken by grade groups. It also surveys staff and faculty, and it also surveys parents. So I believe that's where some of the confusion is. The school climate survey literally encompasses the entire school community.
Yeah, that was what Member Earl was asking about, the inclusion of the surveys that we just approved. Those are approved staff, right? Climate surveys. And so
the exit engagement surveys, I believe, yes,
yeah,
for 325.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just for staff, but not parents.
Right. So if the audiences, there are multiple audiences, is there a necessity for this rule?
Maybe.
Or can we change the other rules title to surveys? I don't know.
That could be part of, staff are happy to bring this rule back along with a suggestion for an additional rule where it would make sense. Though I think that would take some time for staff to look through them and take into consideration everything you guys have just said to make sure that it does fit. So it's a continuation, right? I think so. So we're under a little bit of a time crunch when it comes to the rule one, because it is a 5-year continuation and the continuation is up in February.
Okay.
So if that does make it just a little bit more complicated to muddy the water even more. We could vote today to continue it with the expectation that we're going to revisit this in January and make those changes and then make them in January. We could also vote to repeal it today and make those changes. There's always a special meeting that's hard with the holidays, but those are some options to make sure that it gets done in time.
Okay. My preference would be to not repeal it, to have that discussion in January and then put that, then I can do more legwork and, between now and then make that decision at that time, kind of when we have like all the pieces to put together. So
it should read then
Yes.
that the committee continue R277623 and direct staff to find
How about right here?
an appropriate rule where this can be located or.
I'd put and direct staff to consider the discussion during that SA standards committee meeting and bring recommendations back to the committee for consideration. And that way it could be in a rule, it could be in a guidance, it could be both, it could be, so you could see the different options that could be laid out.
And I think probably the things that I'm looking for the most is like the rule or that you just referenced, that gives that, like those types of conversations. So we have a clear understanding of how they're different and what's required from each if they need to separate. And right now, if you've said it and I'm not calculating quite yet, but I would hope to. So, okay. So should I read that motion?
Good.
The motion is that the committee continue R277623 school climate survey and direct staff to consider the discussion during the standards and assessment committee meeting and bring recommendations back to the committee for consideration.
Do we need to put
Can
in
I
there
ask a
about
question?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you going to continue without any changes, or are you going to move forward draft 2?
Yeah, and also I'm wondering if we
need to rethink that motion.
is there urgency in these draft 2 changes? Because I'm just thinking it's almost like I want the motion to read to direct staff to bring it back, not to, because I'd like to see it side by side and then decide on the amended changes and or repealing with the inclusion of it in the other rule, like all at once rather than saying continue it and or having to consider draft 2 changes. I don't know.
So you're saying
Staff is making these recommendations of
But there
these
are
changes.
changes today on the rule.
if we move draft 2, correct?
Right.
So if we don't want to move forward with the draft 2 changes and keep it at draft 1.
I have an idea.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, because we're going into the legislative session, we will be holding more board meetings in January, right? We'll have an additional board meeting. So we could just put this off, postpone it into January. We'll bring you those things. And then if we could bring this item to a full board legislative board meeting, just as a quick vote, whatever we decide, is that possible?
It is a possibility. Usually board leadership likes to have those meetings just about legislative session. So that is something that could be taken to board leadership for consideration.
So an alternative to that is that we approve draft 2 as amended and consider the alternative of an inclusion in the other survey rule and repealing this rule. But I don't know how that works in a motion other than the approved draft 2 as amended.
So it would be that the committee approve draft 2 as amended and direct staff to bring back draft 2. Well, that would
With alternative options for repeal and inclusion in whatever the other rule is.
I think that is the most simple and straightforward. That would give you the most options as a board. So
Great. Yeah.
You
I
won't
just,
be bringing back draft 2, you'll be bringing back the rule.
the
the
rule,
rule,
as
right.
Because it will no longer be draft 2, it will be, so you'll bring
Yes.
back the rule.
Okay. That makes sense.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure we still have that option in there for repeal and inclusion in the other rule.
So if they pass this, Michelle, well, can we take it to full board in January?
Draft 2 will go to full board in January.
But can the option piece come to full board in January at the same time?
No, the option will come back to this committee. The option will be that the rule that the board passes in January will come back on Friday to you. So the board will pass it on Thursday. Theoretically, if the board passes draft 2 on Thursday, then you will have the rule 623, which is past draft 2, come back to you on Friday with the suggestions from staff to where it could fit in other rules.
which that is fine. The reason to just take the whole, or not fine, I don't get to make that call, but in taking it to the full board in January is just to satisfy OAR, right? We have to get something filed before the beginning of February. So that would give us that, and then we can continue this conversation so that the board can make a thoughtful, considered decision. So there's kind of two purposes for these two decisions.
So when you say to file for OAR and we change that, do you file
We'll file a new one.
a new one? But for now,
We have to file
it'd be
something,
okay.
and we're not ready to file a new one yet.
Okay.
Did I capture?
All right.
Did I capture? Wait, let's read it first because I.
So that the committee approve R277623 draft 2 as amended, school climate survey, and direct staff to consider recommendations stated during the standards and assessment discussion committee meeting and bring amendments back for R277623 to committee for consideration.
Recommendation stated during.
I think, can I speak?
Yes.
I think that it might seem a little confusing to the full board, but you'll have to explain to them the reason that you're doing that is because you had to do the continuation.
Okay.
So it does make sense.
Do you
if
have-
understand the reason that you're doing that is because you're trying to keep it from
I
sunsetting.
would hope I could remember in a month's time.
Do you have recommendations for the motion language to make it more clear?
I think it's clear.
Okay.
You just need to explain that the reason that we're doing is approve it. We're approving it because of the necessary. I can't even talk because you need to continue it so that it doesn't expire.
Well, you guys know we're
Leah,
gonna
can
get
you add
flack
in
from
there
the board.
Does not.
does not.
I got it.
Okay, so just to be clear for us as board members.
Good luck.
What were our recommendations?
Your light went out.
Oh, whoops, sorry. I guess I just wanted to clarify just in what our recommendations are. And I don't know if, I could send an email as well. Mine again was just to make sure that some of the other, working parts and the different laws and stuff, if those can be combined, or if ideally they need to be separated. So did you guys have anything else? Okay. All right. Okay, well, I've read it. Should I read it again or I know. Okay, all in favor of this motion? Aye.
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 All right, passes unanimously. Thank you for your help. And I need to open my computer again.
In the January committee meeting.
Okay. I should just look at my screen. Why am I trying to look at that? January, we're done.
Okay,
Oh, information item.
yes, we are now on the information item, which is our bi-monthly mathematics standards update. Welcome. Okay, I think we have Molly Basham and Nathan Ock, correct?
That's right.
Oh.
That is correct.
Okay, and our two other members.
Molly Basham, Early Learning Mathematics Specialist on the Teaching and Learning team, joined by Nathan Ock and Melissa Garber and Mike Spencer, who are our elementary and secondary math specialists, to give you our update on the standards revision process today. That revision update document is in backup if you want to take a look at it. But since we spoke with you all last in October, we have had a number of meetings with our lead writers, several of them virtual meetings, several of them we have been able to meet with our lead writers in person here at the agency for some full day deep dive meetings that were super productive. And then lead writers have met with their writing teams throughout the months of October and November. But as we have been meeting with them, the committee continues to focus on feedback and revision cycles with the drafts that they have been working in. There's been a heavy focus on vertical alignment between grades and horizontal alignment within the grades. And a lot of focus on clarity of language within the standards, making sure that any educator who reads those standards understands what the intent of that standard is. And there's also been a big focus in the secondary space on creating math pathways that connect the high school math standards to college and career readiness for students. So the teams, in terms of status update, have been continuing to adjust their standard draft based on internal feedback provided by the different standard writing strand-based teams. As I said, we've conducted multiple full-day deep dive reviews. We've really focused in the elementary space on paying attention to that vertical alignment within standards, making sure that the language is clear, making sure that the progression is really strong from pre-K, 3-year-old pre-K all the way up through 5th grade. In the secondary space, they've been working on drafting standards for 3 different pathway options for secondary 3, connected to that college and career readiness item that I mentioned before. And drafting has continued for specific grade level competencies, knowledge, and skills that are captured within the standards. As far as next steps go, as the writers are finishing their feedback and revision process, once they feel that the draft is ready, the next step will be to move that draft into step 7, where it is sent to all board members for a 30-day review. Any questions? I just threw a ton of information at you.
I have a, having just completed recently an election cycle in which I was bombarded with parent concerns and other candidates who were fighting me, in effect, because I was extremely supportive of the agency, of USBE, of our standards, of our approach, of our integrated math. I was singing the praises of how we're recognized nationally. I've been in those conventions where people are asking, okay, how are you guys doing this? And why are those scores what they are? But there are people out in our communities who have been surrounded by perhaps inaccurate or partial information, or information results that are being taken out of context. And so there are far too many that believe honestly in their heart of hearts that the worst thing that could possibly happen would be for us to continue with this integrated math model. And there are those groups of parents, some of them highly organized and some of them quite large, who would prefer that we are offering 2 separate pathways for math instruction in the state of Utah. 1, the old way, and 2, what we're proposing with the current writing teams and revisions. My personal allegiance and loyalty is to the innovative approach that seems to be, in my estimation, and a lot of other folks that happen to be on this same side, that there are great benefits to what is currently being worked on, what is currently being taught, the approach, and the improvements that we're making to that approach. And it's only going to get better from here. But how to meet the concerns of those who feel it would be better to just go back to a pencil and paper, back to our multiplication tables, back to algebra, geometry, the old sequence. Or in many cases, it's a matter of communicating with parents so that they don't feel out of it. They don't feel dumb. Some parents feel like our current integrated model is mathematics for dummies because they're the dummies. They don't get it. This is not the way I've done it. I don't even understand. I have no clue how to help my child do what. And so they tell me to go online and do such and such, and then I'll figure out what I'm supposed to be doing to help my child progress or whatever. So how we handle all of these issues that are contributing to a fairly divisive frame of mind on the part of our constituents, I think is something that, in addition to, you do have a few tasks before you to finish the process of writing the standards and rewriting and getting everything just the way you want it. But on top of that, we've got to figure out how to make it work and how to help it produce the results that our specialists and our professionals are convinced will be the results of these standards and of the implementation of what you're proposing, or in the middle of drafting and proposing. So that was a lot of information, but I'm personally not supportive of two approaches to math instruction. I don't know how in the world we would ever make that happen. But I do know that there are parents who are very they feel very justified in their because of what they're experiencing as parents and what they see their children experiencing. So how we help us make the transition into the 21st century and end up with the foundational knowledge that will securely prepare our children to navigate successfully and efficiently in their world. So if you could solve all of the problems of the world, good luck. We're ready to hear your.
Can I just start?
Well, you happen to know something about math.
I know a little bit about math, and I'm just looking over here because the one thing I swore not to do in this position is to speak on behalf of experts that are doing this every day. And so, but I'm not going to say but this is my last standards and assessment meeting. This is our last agenda item, and it is math. Like, who could have, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was meant to be. It was meant to be. Yes. And so, but what I am going to do out of total respect and expertise is to allow them to speak to it first. And then I might add some finishing touches to it.
Yeah. So Nathan Ock, STEM coordinator for the Utah State Board of Education. Those are all like big issues and concerns and valid concerns that both our review committee at the beginning of the process and our writing committee subsequent to the review committee's recommendations being offered have considered in depth. And I think it's worth noting, and I just want to make sure, Chair Booth, that your experiences have aligned with ours. The feedback has largely been about secondary. When we talk about integrated versus non-integrated, pre-K 8 has always been integrated. And so we aren't hearing feedback about that. So I'm gonna like.
Although we are hearing from parents who feel like the approach is like Greek to them. It's different than it was when they were going to school in Genola or in Juab or wherever it is that, this is, I don't get it. I can't help my second grader, my third grader. My third grader is supposed to be doing multiplication and blah, 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 and something. And now they're doing these story problems that I have no clue what in the world. Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
And sometimes I personally watch I've got two grandchildren that are twins in third grade, and they are smart as a whip, and they are so fast at doing what they're supposed to be doing. Who knew that a third grader could do that and could be on top of this? And I'm so excited when they explain to me what their teachers have had them do in terms of mastering this. And I'm kind of just looking at them like, I don't totally understand what you're saying, but you're doing it and you seem to get it. So that's fine. It is different than it was. I was learning my whatever in third grade in Paul Elementary School in Paul, Idaho, one horse town. We had a great teacher, but I have no idea what in the world learning theory and everything else has developed so that these kids are getting it so much better, in my estimation, at least in the schools that my grandkids are going to. And I know that other parents are experiencing different things in Cedar City or in other places, but we've just got to figure out how to take all of that feedback and figure out how to help people relax, take a breath and go, it's going to be okay. It's not only going to be okay, it's going to be great. And these kids are going to just master this, and they're going to be ready to go to the stars, shoot for the stars, because they have such a mastery and such an understanding of how to use the skills in productive ways. So.
Yeah, so I think it's worth noting that, like, so frequently in this conversation, it's really hard to separate the content that we're teaching from the pedagogy and the methods that we use to teach it. So when we talk about the conversation of algebra, geometry, algebra 2 course pathways in secondary versus an integrated model of secondary 1, secondary 2, secondary 3, whatever that looks like, there's two different conversations happening, I think, at the same time sometimes, where it comes to new pedagogical methods. And, like over the past 20, 30, 40 years, there's a lot of research that has helped direct best practice, the ways that we can best meet the needs of every student in mathematics instruction. And so, like, as that has made its way into educators' hands, they've started to use it, regardless of whether they live in Utah and teach integrated standards, or they live in Oklahoma and teach algebra, geometry, algebra 2 in the secondary space. So I just want to make sure that we're having conversations about the part of the process that we have been tasked with, which is standards revision. The pedagogy part is something that we empower LEAs to make the decisions that's best for their community. And as part of this discussion, the standards matter. They're kind of the vehicle for how the pedagogy operates. But regardless of which kind of direction a community chooses, integrated doesn't mandate the pedagogy that students are engaged with. So just to touch on some other points that you brought up during your kind of questions. We spent a lot of time as a writing committee, and I suppose I should say we as USB staff spent a lot of time having conversations with the writing committee to empower them to make decisions about the best ways to move forward. And so we surveyed our state mathematics specialists. We had conversations with community members across the state. And then we also had more targeted conversations drawing on that data within the writing committee as the process was going forward to like hear what the feedback was, and some of the things that you mentioned were like bouncing around communities. And so were worth considering. So it wasn't something that the writing committee was making assumptions about from the beginning, that the new secondary standards were going to be integrated. And after deep consideration, and there was a report that our secondary mathematics specialist at the time, Lindsay Henderson, completed and put into board backup last spring. I don't know what month it was off the top of my head, but that report kind of laid out both a research base as well as a kind of community base for the reasons that the writing committee landed on pursuing integrated standards in the secondary area. Some of the kind of circumstances that were brought up in conversation is economics. Communities or states that have that choice in play, it requires a lot of extra resources to be able to support both options. And so mobility was another big talking point, where if students move from one district to another and they've gotten a certain set of standards and now they move on to the course progression in this new district that has a different set of standards, it becomes harder to meet that student's needs. And then like experience of our specialists, they found both in reading the literature as well as in their experiences that student outcomes were better in integrated circumstances. With that said, there are a couple of states that have started as integrated requirement states and gone to choice pathways. So just, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago, I reached out to West Virginia, which was one of the states that has had that experience, because I heard kind of through the grapevine that they had produced a report comparing the outcomes of students in the communities that decided to continue with integrated versus the communities that decided to go to the AGA model. I don't have that report in my hands yet, so I can't speak to the specifics of it, but I'm happy to provide it when it comes out. But the gentleman that I talked to said that the communities that had gone the integrated route had better outcomes for their students on their statewide testing. So there was definitely other deeper discussions involving data science, like explicit kind of focus of data science in secondary spaces is kind of called out with an integrated approach. And then the opportunities that exist at the intersection of the disciplines is one of the things that our specialists brought up really consistently as to the power of integrated. When we talk about the durable skills that our employers are looking for and our colleges, our professors are asking about, what the specialist said was those durable skills live. The content is so important to get students to be able to a place where they can apply content in meaningful ways. And that application is where the durable skills live that employers are looking for. I think board member Hymas had talked about that kind of progression as you get into high school, the like depth and breadth of applicative mathematics kind of explodes. And that idea, I think, is a good kind of analog for the types of conversations that I was a part of, and also that the writing committee had connected to this space. So there's a foundation.
I was going to say, if I might add on, as we've collaborated with other departments in the agency to support us in this conversation with our writing team, something that has been brought up about the potential impact of the standards if we were to go the route of having both an algebra, geometry, algebra 2 pathway and an integrated pathway would be there's potential impacts on the assessment side of this, of us needing to have 2 separate mathematics assessments in the secondary space, because if a student were in an LEA that was using a traditional pathway versus an integrated pathway, you wouldn't necessarily be assessing the same standards in each grade. And that it potentially also could have major impacts for our students who are on essential element standards, who have significant cognitive disabilities, because those standards for those student groups have to align with our core standards. So if there's 2 separate standard pathways for our gen ed students, there would also need to be 2 separate standards for our significantly cognitively impaired students. And so it's just, there's a kind of snowballing effects if we were to have 2 separate standards pathways, that it has further implications down the road of then potentially having to have multiple assessments, have multiple pathways for our special education students. It goes beyond just having to write 2 sets of standards, like Nate mentioned.
So this is like the proudest moment ever, because all I can say is ditto. Like, that's the additive value I have at this point in time. And isn't that the perfect time to step away and start something new? So well done.
Deputy Patty Norman, I adore you. And I'm so glad that I've been able to serve on this committee with you because of your expertise and the way that you tackle tough questions, and you're so collaborative, and I could go on and on. No, I would love for you to give your hope for these math standards moving forward as you leave. If you have any hope of what you, maybe a reflection on, what we know about our math students and the way they're performing, and what you hope that you see coming from the board in regards to these standards.
Thank you. Do not make me teary. Okay. Who gets teary about math? Let's just talk about that. Okay.
I want to add that I got the privilege of being able to see you be on a panel with a bunch of experts in Washington, D.C., a bunch of education experts in math, and brag and talk about how amazing our math team is and how amazing our math students are and how well we have done as a state despite the pandemic. And it was like really, really cool for me to see you up there, and all of these other states were looking to you as an expert and your knowledge base, but also to learn from Utah about why we're doing so well, or why we're doing better than other states. And they were looking to you for advice, and no one better. But also, I think that was a really proud moment for our state as well. So that's where I'm coming from the math standards. And I would love to see I'd love to know what you think moving forward.
My hope for the standards is that we get away from math wars. I think we had reading wars in the past about, should we do phonics? Should we do whole reading? Should we do this? Should we do that? And I think that we've landed in the standards that we have been going on at a place where it's no longer this dichotomy, this distinctly different, are we going to do fluency, memorization, recitation, or are we just going to do, this, everyone's going to discover an algorithm all on their own? And I think that where Utah landed is a place where they're learning about the mathematics. But if you forget a formula, it doesn't mean you get the problem wrong. You have additional ways of being able to solve what that looks like. And if we get away from the wars about what's best and we get to what's working and how do we polish it and make it better, the conversation changes. And that's where I'm hoping that our writing committee is at, is the conversation is, where are we at? What needs to happen next? We are in a transformational point in education at this very moment. We have AI, we have things that our students are going to have to know and be able to do, things that they're going to have in their short-term memory, their long-term memory, to be able to access those facts, to be able to do the next steps of math. But then there's things that we no longer have to teach them as a complex algorithm, because we will be able to have someone else do that complex work. And we have students now accessing mathematics that they've never been able to access because they didn't have the capability of memorizing, and we held them back. I was just in Oklahoma, and someone asked, well, shouldn't we hold students back in third grade who didn't memorize their multiplication facts? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because those students still have the ability to think complexly and solve problems with a little effort on the side. Do we want them to memorize their facts? Absolutely. No one's saying we don't. No one's saying we don't. And that's what math wars are about. Is it this or is it that? It's not. We say, here's a student. What are their needs? How do we support this child to get to the next step, giving them access to grade level curriculum and content? The standards are the most important foundational piece of that. And so if you as a board in this very important work that you do, don't fall prey to the wars and just say, what has been working for Utah? How do we get better? I do know that we have some people saying, well, yes, Utah's doing good, but how do you know we can't be better? Well, if Utah is above the pack ACT, we look at NAEP, we look at all the scores. I'm looking to Darren back there, and we actually have a handout what that looks like. We look at the number of students who have to go in and take remedial courses when they're in their post-secondary, and we look how Utah is nailing it. And I continue to hear the board say we can't look to national standards. So if we're doing something that's uniquely Utah and it's working, why aren't we polishing it and giving that the respect that it deserves to be able to say, then what is the next step according to the steps that we've had in the past? Get away from the wars, do what's working for students, and succeed, continue to be the top of the nation, continue to say Utah is proceeding to do the right thing. And look at these experts we have. Like, if I could just choose that team, like each one of them has a distinct role, and they have withstood the test of time in their districts and their LEAs and with parents. And parents are a central role. We can't make them feel like they're not a part of this process because they want to help their children at home. And so that is one of the things that in doing the standards, how do we incorporate parents and teaching parents what this looks like in this new way of thinking and being, especially with the transformative movement of AI. And so that's my hope. So thank you for asking.
Thank you. I adore you.
I think with the math and to, the conversation about, well, there's this group and there's this group, I think at the root of both of those groups is just the ability, whether you communicate it good or not, that there is, they're trying to communicate what is not working for them. And so if we got at the root of, okay, explain what that feels like or what that looks like. If let's just say if it's not memorizing your multiplications and they have an 8th grader that doesn't know their multiplication and they haven't memorized that, there was somewhere along the way that they missed that. And I like the concept. No, we don't hold them back. Let's keep them moving because they can still work through that. Have a little supplement there on the side one day that we know, a lot of sometimes that learning is like a switch and it just goes on one day. And so I think one way that we can fix that problem is listening to the people and saying, at the root of this concern, what is at the root of that concern? And what is it in math that you are seeing is lacking? And then we just take that and just say, okay, what are we lacking? Okay, could we polish it? So anyway, I'm looking forward to it. I have had conversations on if it's integrated, if it's not integrated, if it's memorization. I do feel like the foundational parts, like the mathematics or the multiplication, that's like a reflex, right? Like it becomes that. When that becomes that, the door opens up. And I've heard that from many, many, many elementary teachers, 4th and 5th grade. They said when they learn that, math opens up to them. And so anyway, but I'm anxious to hear.
If I may, Vice Chair Green, I can say that the elementary writing leads have spent hours and hours and hours talking about the standards that touch on fluency and numeracy and polishing those standards to make sure that they clearly communicate expectations in a way that will, as you said, hopefully help students be accurate and efficient and have that automaticity that is so powerful. So I can definitely say they are putting a tremendous amount of time and effort into making sure that those standards specifically are written in a way that will meet the needs of students and meet the needs of families, because that is what it boils down to. And I think that's why so many parents do speak up about math, is because it can be very emotional. They want what's best for their kids. And our writers also very much want what's best for kids.
And somehow culturally, it's become the only subject that we have people right? Like there's no such thing, like we don't talk about not being a social studies person. It's like, it's okay to say I'm not a math person. And as like math educators, that's really hard for us to hear, because ultimately it was a failure of an educator at some point to like light up that student so that they didn't feel like that they were a math person, because we believe, just like every person is all the other content people, that every person's also a math person. So to that automaticity point, it's like, while our writing team has talked about the importance of incorporating the kind of durable skills that you were mentioning, Patty, like they also have emphasized, like, it doesn't mean de-emphasizing content. Like that content, the piece, the practice, the getting to automaticity, we call automaticity the like practice to the point that you just know it. And that automaticity is like a kind of gateway to being able to apply mathematics in meaningful and interesting ways. So like, while they will spend a lot of time with those, the kind of applicative stuff, that the writing team believes really firmly, and we've all spent a lot of time like trying to get to really clear content in the standards, to ensure that part of our conversation isn't de-emphasized. It's like an integral part in ensuring that students are set up to be successful at doing the things that Patty was mentioning.
And I have one little shout out I want to give my daughter. We took an out school course and we did multiplication boot camp. I think it's an actual course. Like, it was so amazing because there's rules to multiplication, at least the way that this teacher had presented it. And it helped my daughter learn those multiplications. And she's really, really, really good at 11 times tables. So you just like 11 times 15, you split the 15, right? You've 1 and 5. Now add the 1 and 5. 11 times 15 is 165. Wow. Right? Yeah. Yes. Anyway, all of the numbers apparently have rules. You'll always know how to. My fingers. Yeah. Anyway, so that's all I have. Anybody
Thank
else?
We are grateful
Thank
for
you.
the work that you're doing. And I especially applaud your ability to continue moving forward with a clear vision, a clear shared vision amongst your team and amongst the people that you have invited on a consistent basis to the table to share in the formulation of direction and process. And I feel so supportive. I feel so confident. And when I communicate that confidence, sometimes it frustrates some parents that are trying to tear me apart or tear the system or the standards apart, because I don't know yet how to communicate with them and how to help them see. But I love what Board Member Green was saying. We've really got to get to the root. We've got to listen. We've got to understand what is not working and why is it not working, because it's working just fine for somebody else down the street. And it can work for every child if we figure out what are the impediments, what are the barriers, what are the hurdles that we've got to jump over, what's the clarity that needs to be put in place or brought in place that will allow each child and especially their parents to be able to come along so that they feel empowered to help their child succeed. So we're grateful and we look forward to continued reports and the great work that we'll have a chance to review very soon. It's exciting.
Chair Booth, can I extend that gratitude to our writing committee as well? I know that they can't be here, but like just a more remarkable, like insightful, thoughtful, kind of interested group of math educators you couldn't ask for. They're super fantastic. And I just want publicly to commend the work that they have done.
Deputy Norman was saying who tears up about math, and we have left, I think our whole team can say, we have left our last several meetings with our lead writers a little misty-eyed, saying that we wish that everyone, board members, parents, educators, could be a fly on the wall for even 5 minutes in some of those meetings with the lead writers, because of how much thought and attention and expertise they are bringing to the table, thinking about all the things you just said to keep into consideration, thinking about the research behind progressions and learning trajectories and developmental appropriateness of standards. Like, there is just, the conversations give me chills sometimes, because it is just so powerful to hear this group of educators meet and talk and get excited and geek out about math together. It's really beautiful. It's such a fun process. I never thought that I would be sitting here saying that standards revision was such a fun process, but it has, our writing teams are incredible.
That's awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that shout out, and we echo it. We're very, very excited to have the team that you brought together working for our kids. All right, great. Are we ready to adjourn?
Yeah.
Move to adjourn.
Right. All in favor?
Aye. We're not. Thank you.
Perfect last.
Thank you.
That was a great last meeting.
No. I honestly.
Just a little Christmas card.
So there it is. Something left to say. Could you just say?
Thank you. I'm ready to go at the.
Thanks for running that for us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
What do we?